In a quiet town, Deputy Patrick Quinn faces a crumbling marriage with Clarissa. Desperate and lonely, he falls into a forbidden affair with his mother-in-law, Caroline Bennett. Passion ignites, secrets unravel, and Patrick's life spirals out of control. With guilt tightening its grip, Patrick must choose between desire and duty before everything he loves is destroyed. Betrayal burns hot, and the line between right and wrong blurs beyond recognition. Will Patrick survive the fallout, or will his darkest impulses consume him? The stakes have never been higher. At 17:25, Liz Harrison, our dispatcher, called in. I always preferred when Liz was on duty. Her calm voice commanded attention. I pressed the button on my portable radio. Dispatch 25, go, I responded. We've got a possible kidnapping at 685 Front Street, Red River Falls, Liz relayed. A 7-year-old girl taken by her father and a woman. The vehicle is a maroon 98 Plymouth Voyager, Choctaw County plates VDA 64L. Suspects may be armed. A kidnapping in Mason County. I was patrolling the southern area and needed to position myself to intercept. Dispatch 25, understood. Any direction on their movement? I asked. Statewide Amber Alert in effect. Details coming, she replied. My name is Patrick Quinn, a deputy sheriff in Mason County. It was a hot August day and my shift was nearing its end when the Amber Alert hit. I was cruising along County Road Y-29, a quiet stretch 15 miles south of Red River Falls, when the alert popped up on my laptop. The details described the suspect, William Raymond Jackson, a big guy with a criminal history that included assault, theft, drug charges, and indecent exposure. The Amber Alert had gone out at 14:39. My watch read 14:46. Dispatch 25. What time was the abduction reported? I asked. 14:32, came the reply. If they left immediately, they could be nearby. I floored the accelerator, the V8 engine roaring as I sped east on Y-29 toward US 120. I didn't turn on the lights or siren. I wanted them to see me coming. Hitting 100 miles per hour, I reached the intersection of Y-29 and US 120 in minutes. No traffic. The road south was mostly straight, curving toward the river cliffs. I decided to head south, figuring the kidnapper would avoid the interstate. I parked near an old gas station by a sun-baked car graveyard, waiting, hoping I was in the right spot. The extra vehicles provided some cover, helping my cruiser blend in. Despite this, I started to question my choice of using a marked police car. I checked my watch. 14:51. 19 minutes had passed since the kidnapping. If they were on the right path, they could appear any moment unless they took a different route back to Cherokee Flats. The Amber Alert hadn't mentioned the woman reportedly with the abductor, which made me uneasy. I quickly checked my equipment, preparing for a potentially tough situation. With only 6 deputies in the county and a few city officers in Red River Falls, help might take time to arrive. I touched my new sidearm, a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson, and ensured my shotgun and Bushmaster rifle were secured, though I doubted I'd need them. My taser was tucked in on my belt, but my sidearm would be the first choice, especially since I needed to find the girl quickly. I scanned the area, ready with 60 rounds if necessary, hoping I wouldn't have to use them. Suddenly, I noticed a vehicle approaching from the north. It was moving at a reasonable speed, about 71 mph, nothing too suspicious. As it got closer, I identified it as a maroon Chrysler minivan. My heart raced as I prepared to act. The driver, a bearded man, gripped the steering wheel, focused straight ahead. It seemed my cruiser had blended in well. My palms grew sweaty as I shifted into gear and followed the minivan south on Y-120, increasing speed to get closer. I confirmed the license plate, VDA 64L. The van was old, rusted, with a cracked windshield. The strong scent of burning oil filled my cruiser. The driver seemed to realize he was being followed, anxiously checking his mirrors. I called it in. Dispatch 1725. I have eyes on the suspect's vehicle heading south on US 120, just past mile marker 105, requesting all units to my location. My excitement was barely contained as I awaited backup. Liz calmly relayed the information, and soon my friend Danny Larson and a state trooper responded, but both were still miles away. It was clear I'd be handling this alone for at least the next 10 minutes. The minivan started to slow, indicating the driver might stop. I reached for the console and switched on my emergency lights. I activated my siren, signaling the minivan to pull over. It stopped, but only partially on the shoulder, making me think the driver might try to escape. I positioned my cruiser at an angle, using it as a shield, and took out my Smith & Wesson, keeping my finger off the trigger. Through the loudspeaker, I ordered the driver to move completely onto the shoulder, turn off the engine, and drop the keys out of the window. The driver complied, dropping the keys while nervously glancing at me through the mirror. He seemed to be instructing someone else in the van. With the situation tense, I commanded everyone to exit through the driver's side with their hands visible. The door slowly opened and a bearded man stepped out, talking to someone inside. Just as I was about to issue another command, the van's back window shattered and buckshot hit my windshield. Pain shot through my hip and ribs as I dropped to my knee, using my cruiser for cover. The bearded man charged toward me, fumbling with his revolver. I fired 2 shots, hitting him in the chest, but he kept coming, managing to get off a shot that hit my vest. I fired again, this time striking him in the neck and head, and he collapsed in front of my car. Struggling to breathe, I prepared to confront the van again, only to find myself staring down the barrel of a shotgun held by a screaming woman in the back seat. I fired just as she did. The van's window shattered and the screaming stopped, but intense pain hit my right side and I collapsed, unable to use my right arm. As I lay on the asphalt, bleeding and in shock, I saw a bloodied arm reach out from the van, grab the keys, and drive away. My protective gear had done its best, but I was badly injured. With my last strength, I called for help before everything went dark. 8 days later, I awoke to the sound of a man's voice calling my name. Slowly, my vision cleared, and I found myself surrounded by people. The doctor explained that I had been in a medically induced coma and had just come off a breathing tube. "You'll feel sore for a few days and your throat might be hoarse," Dr. Nate Slattery explained. He introduced himself as the surgeon who operated on me and pointed out the team of doctors and nurses who had been caring for me. I could barely move my stiff neck as I took in the room full of machines and monitors surrounding me. "We'll help you get back on your feet," Dr. Slattery continued with a reassuring smile. "We'll keep a close eye on you for the next 48 hours, especially your breathing. Hopefully you'll continue to improve." I nodded weakly, and he encouraged me to rest. As the medical team left, one nurse stayed behind, checking the monitors and IVs before I drifted back to sleep. When I woke up, sunlight filled the room. A young nurse with sandy hair tied in a ponytail was checking my vitals. Her kind smile and bright blue eyes immediately put me at ease. "Good morning," she greeted warmly. "How are you feeling?" "I'm not sure. Okay, I think," I replied softly, looking at the IV lines in my arm. She asked about my pain level, and as I tried to move my right arm, a sharp pain shot through me. Tears welled up in my eyes from the discomfort. "Let me get a pillow to support your arm," she offered gently, lifting my arm with such care that I barely felt any pain. Her touch was comforting. She asked me to wiggle my fingers, and despite the pain, I managed it. "That's a good sign," she said, placing my hand back on the pillow. She then explained that I had been shot twice, with 6 large fragments removed from my arm, 1 from my lung, and 4 from my leg. One piece had come dangerously close to an important artery in my lung, but I had survived against the odds. "You're a fighter, Mr. Quinn," she said with a warm smile. "You're a hero, especially to me." I wanted to know more about what had happened, but I was too tired to ask. She promised to stay nearby if I needed anything, pointing out the red button to call her. "Try to rest," she urged, her eyes glistening with tears. "You have no idea how much it means to me to take care of you, Mr. Quinn." As she left, I realized I hadn't even asked her name. I noticed a board at the foot of my bed displaying the date, my room number, and the names of my physician and nurse, Shannon Sullivan, Irish, like me. How lucky am I? Despite feeling groggy, I wasn't ready to sleep and missed Shannon already, even though she was just a few feet away. I turned on the TV to distract myself. The clock showed it was almost noon, and a local news broadcast had just started. The anchors reported that I had emerged from my medically induced coma and was now awake, talking, and breathing on my own. They recounted the events of the kidnapping, how I had responded to the Amber Alert, confronted the suspects, and despite being shot, managed to return fire, killing William Raymond Jackson and injuring Kimberly Trenton. Bridget Sullivan, the little girl, was found safe and unharmed. As the news continued, I turned off the TV, overwhelmed by memories of that day, the blood on the ground, my wrecked car. I felt a mix of guilt and gratitude for surviving when others hadn't, and relief that Bridget was safe. But I realized I hadn't seen my wife, Clarissa, or my sons, Nicholas and Jacob, since waking up. I pressed the nurse call button, and Shannon appeared, concern on her face. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" she asked. In a hoarse voice, I asked, "Where is my family?" Shannon hesitated before explaining that Clarissa thought I needed rest and would visit when I felt better. Confused and hurt, I couldn't understand why she wasn't there when I needed her most. Seeing my distress, Shannon held my hand, reassuring me that Clarissa probably didn't want the boys to see me in this condition. She added that if my latest tests were good, I'd be moved to a regular room soon. I managed a small smile, grateful for Shannon's kindness, even though I was still deeply troubled by my family's absence. I smiled and thanked Shannon. She told me to get some rest and started to leave, but I held her hand a moment longer. It felt comforting, and I wanted to say something. "Please, just call me Patrick," I asked. She smiled, squeezed my hand, and agreed. Later that afternoon, my blood tests showed improvement, though I still had infections in my leg and arm. I was relieved not to have pneumonia, but the chest tube and catheter were uncomfortable. Shannon informed me that I wouldn't be moved from intensive care until the next morning, which pleased her because it meant she could care for me a bit longer. I learned she had taken extra shifts to stay by my side. As her shift neared its end, Shannon returned with a cart of warm water and washcloths to help me freshen up before moving to a new room. I had gained some strength and my throat was feeling better after she allowed me to drink some water and juice. "You mean like a wash?" I asked. "More or less," she replied, carefully preparing to clean around my bandages. I felt nervous as she adjusted my gown, but I focused on being grateful for her care. Shannon worked gently, starting with my upper body, and the warm water felt refreshing. She took her time, being careful around my injuries, making sure I was comfortable. As she moved to wash my lower body, I began to feel uneasy. "Shannon, I think I need you to stop," I said tensely. "It's okay, Patrick. I'm almost done," she reassured me, finishing quickly. Afterward, she called in an assistant to help change the sheets, and by the time they finished, her shift was nearly over. Shannon returned to say goodbye, her eyes filled with tears. "It's been special taking care of you, Patrick. I owe you so much for bringing my daughter back to me," she said, her voice shaking. "Thank you for looking after me so well," I replied. Shannon promised to check on me in my new room to ensure I was well cared for. She wished me good night, then left the room, sharing a final sad smile before departing. Early the next morning, my overnight nurse, Tina, transferred me to a new room on the med-surg floor. My new nurse, Brian, was friendly, and Sherry, the nursing assistant, checked my vitals and temperature around 10 a.m. My wife, Clarissa, finally came to visit, though the boys weren't with her. I told her I missed her and asked why she hadn't come sooner. Annoyed, she replied that she had been there during the first week, waiting through my 16-hour surgery, and asked if I thought she had been ignoring me. I tried to explain that I was just feeling lonely since waking up 2 days ago and hadn't seen her until now. Clarissa told me she didn't want the boys to see me like this and mentioned they'd all been dealing with allergies. I was too weak to argue, so we spent the next hour discussing my recovery with Dr. Slattery and Dr. Morgenstern. They said I might be able to go home in 4 to 6 weeks, though I'd still be in the hospital for a while longer. After about 2 hours, Clarissa said she needed to get home to take care of the boys and the animals. I was disappointed, hoping she'd stay longer, but she insisted she couldn't. She touched my forehead and left, leaving me feeling confused and hurt by her distance. My chest tightened, and I felt tears welling up. Nurse Brian came in to check on me, and I told him I'd just really missed my kids. Clarissa's coldness shocked me. If she were in my position, nothing could have kept me away from her. Our relationship had been strained for years, especially since I started working at the sheriff's department. Clarissa had health issues that affected our closeness, and despite my urging, she relied on herbal remedies that didn't help much. We had few moments of connection over the past year, and I had felt increasingly pushed away. I even started wondering if she might be unfaithful, though I never thought it possible. Clarissa had been a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling our boys until they started public school this year. Their happiness in school meant everything to us, even though I disliked the long bus rides they had to endure. The next day, Brian removed my catheter, which was a huge relief. Clarissa didn't arrive until dinner but brought the best surprise: the boys. Nick and Jake rushed to me, shouting, "Dad!" and carefully hugged me, mindful of my injuries. For 2 hours, they excitedly shared stories about school and how their friends admired me for my bravery. Their pride in me brought a sense of happiness, even as I continued to grapple with the weight of my actions. I found comfort in knowing that my experiences were valuable to my kids, especially Nick, who was adjusting to junior high. Even though homeschooling is becoming more common, it still felt a bit awkward here in Mason County. I was willing to face any troublemakers myself to protect my kids from bullies. At 7 p.m., Clarissa told the boys it was time to go home. They complained, wanting to stay longer, but she firmly insisted they leave because it was a school night. I hugged them tightly and asked Clarissa if she could come back later after visiting hours. She responded a bit loudly, "Is that all you think about?" and said she wouldn't be coming back tonight. Embarrassed, I asked her to bring me some toothpaste and a toothbrush tomorrow, which she agreed to before giving me a quick kiss on the forehead and leaving. I didn't have much time to feel sorry for myself because soon after, Shannon appeared in my doorway. "You're looking better already," she said with a bright smile. I felt a bit shy, insisting I wasn't a hero, but Shannon disagreed. "You saved my daughter's life," she said, sitting beside my bed. Just then, Brian, my nurse, came in, concerned about my heart rate, which had jumped. Shannon and I both blushed, and Brian, realizing the awkwardness, left us alone. Shannon then asked if she could bring her daughter by to meet me, which I eagerly agreed to, despite having had troubling dreams about her. Shannon comforted me, suggesting the stress and medication might be causing the nightmares. She promised to check on me after her shift the next day and bring Bridget by soon. The next week passed a bit faster. They removed the chest tube, and I began taking short walks with the help of Brian and his assistant, Sherry. My right arm was still weak, but I could at least stand and walk slowly. By the end of the week, I could lift a small glass of juice with my right hand, a big step considering how badly my arm had been injured. Clarissa and the boys visited a few times, but never on consecutive days. The boys missed me and often asked to visit more, but Clarissa always said, "We'll see." Then, on Sunday evening at the end of my 3rd week in the hospital, Shannon surprised me by bringing Bridget. Seeing them together was heartwarming, and I couldn't help but smile as Shannon introduced her daughter to me. "Bridget, this is Patrick. He helped you the day you were taken from me." Shannon had told me she expected Bridget to be quite young and perhaps still scared, but instead Bridget was a bright and cheerful young lady. "Hi, Patrick. It's so nice to meet you," she said with a big smile. I sat up a bit to look more presentable. "Hello, Bridget. It's really nice to meet you too," I replied, smiling back. Bridget was lively and friendly, much more outgoing than most kids with new people. "I made a picture for you. Can I give it to you?" she asked excitedly. "Of course, I can't wait to see it," I said. Bridget handed me a colorful drawing of me wearing a green sheriff hat and a big star badge, holding hands with a girl dressed like her. "It's a picture of you and me, Patrick. You can put it on the wall so you can see it all the time," she said proudly. "Absolutely. I want it to be the first thing I see in the morning. Thank you so much, Bridget. You're a very talented artist," I praised her, and she beamed with happiness. We chatted for about half an hour until my nurse, Tanya, came in to let me know it was time for my evening walk. Before Shannon and Bridget could leave, I spoke up. "Bridget, I'd love to get some exercise tonight. I usually use a cane or walker, but I think I can walk pretty well if I have someone to hold on to. Would you like to walk with me?" Bridget's face lit up with joy. "Of course, Patrick. I'll make sure you don't fall," she said enthusiastically. Tanya guided us into the hallway. I held onto the rail with my left hand and Bridget's hand with my right. Shannon reminded Bridget to be gentle with my hand, and Bridget promised she would. We walked and talked for about 20 minutes, and I was impressed by how confident and caring Bridget was for someone so young. Shannon watched us with a smile, occasionally chatting with others in the hallway, but always keeping an eye on us. By the end of the walk, I was tired, but even Tanya was impressed with how well I did. I credited all my success to Bridget, and she happily accepted the praise. Back in my room, as Tanya helped me into bed, Shannon told Bridget, "We should head home now and let Patrick rest. You did a great job helping him tonight. I'm proud of you." Bridget gave me a big, tight hug, and Shannon's eyes glimmered as she mouthed thank you to me. I nodded in return. "I work 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. tomorrow. I'll try to come by when I can," Shannon said as she prepared to leave. "I'd like that," I replied. She smiled, waved, and left the room with Bridget. I settled back in bed and turned on the TV, but my thoughts kept returning to my time with Bridget and Shannon. I didn't know why, but they had both found a way into my heart. I was in such a good mood that it took me a while to realize I wasn't even upset that Clarissa hadn't visited me that day. Spending time with Bridget made me miss my sons, and I felt a bit unhappy that I hadn't seen them. It was Sunday, and Clarissa usually took the boys to Mass at St. Matthew's, which was a short walk from the hospital. I thought it would have been easy for them to come and see me afterward. I called home, and Nick answered. We chatted for about 20 minutes before he handed the phone to my youngest son, Jacob, who wasn't much for talking yet. After I finished with Jacob, Nick came back on the line. "Is your mom around?" I asked. "She's here, but she's on the computer. She told me not to bother her," Nick replied. "Can you let her know I called and would like to talk to her?" I asked. A few minutes later, Nick returned. "Mom said she's busy and that I should keep talking to you. She said she'll see you tomorrow." Frustration rose within me. I was tired of this situation, and if it continued, we'd need to have a serious talk. After saying goodbye to Nick and Jacob, I hung up. Instead of sleeping, I spent the night flipping through TV channels, trying to figure out what to say to Clarissa when she came to visit. I finally fell asleep around 3 or 4 in the morning, despite several gentle reminders from my nurse to rest. I slept for a few hours before Brian entered my room around 10 a.m. "You've got a visitor," he said. To my surprise, my boss, Sheriff William Bud Roberts of Mason County, walked into my room. Bud and I had worked together years ago at the Red River Falls Police Department, and he was the one who encouraged me to apply for the deputy position, which allowed Clarissa and me to move out of Red River Falls to a bigger place. "Well, look who it is," Bud shouted as he entered. "Bud, it's great to see you, even if you look a bit rough," I joked. "Yeah, not all of us can look as good as you on TV, superstar," he replied, patting my shoulder. Bud had a strong presence, about my size but with a political edge that helped him get elected sheriff. He was in his early 50s, fit but carrying a bit of extra weight. His neatly styled hair and perfectly parted look made him seem more like a news anchor than a sheriff. He wore a suit and tie with his badge on his belt and pins on his lapel, one for the American flag and another for his badge. His expression turned serious. "How are you doing?" he asked. I took a deep breath and told him things were going well. I was starting physical therapy on my arm and had regained more movement than I expected. Bud smiled, saying everyone at the office was proud of me and that the sheriff's office looked like a flower shop with all the plants and flowers people had sent. We spent the next 45 minutes talking, and Bud updated me on the investigation. The Department of Criminal Investigation had cleared me, confirming that everything I did was within the law. There were questions about my decisions during the initial stages, but video from my car's camera showed the minivan slowing down, suggesting the driver was looking for a confrontation, so I had to act. As for the woman in the van, it was also deemed justifiable. She was armed and dangerous. Bud then mentioned that I was officially on a 30-day leave, all of which would be spent in the hospital, but I'd still receive full pay and benefits. Before leaving, he asked how my family was handling everything. I sighed, explaining that the boys were doing fine but were confused about why they couldn't visit more often. But Clarissa, things were harder between us. I admitted how distant she seemed and how she appeared uninterested since the incident. Bud listened carefully as I poured out my frustrations. He then reminded me that being married to someone in law enforcement is tough. and Clarissa had been faced with raising 2 boys and managing the farm alone. "It must have been a lot for her to handle," he said. I nodded, understanding his point, but I still felt something wasn't right. Bud stood up and came closer. "I'm not a relationship expert, but some people just aren't cut out to be married to someone in this line of work, and that's nobody's fault." His words hit me hard, making me wonder how much worse things might get once I left the hospital and returned to daily life. As Bud reached the doorway, he mentioned that Floyd Franklin, the captain and chief deputy, had put in his retirement request. "With your qualifications, you should apply for his job when you're ready," he said. The idea of becoming captain and chief deputy surprised me. It would mean a regular schedule, no more patrols, and maybe some stability that could help fix things with Clarissa. "Wow, yes, I'll definitely think about it," I replied, feeling a glimmer of hope. "Sounds good, Pat. Take care and I'll visit again soon," Bud said, giving me a comforting pat on the shoulder before leaving. The next few weeks were tough. As I started my daily physical therapy sessions, spending 6 hours a day working hard, the pain and exhaustion were intense, but it was worth it. My progress was faster than expected, thanks to being in good shape from my regular workouts at the Red River Falls PD. Soon, I regained about 60% of the strength in my right arm and started walking normally again. I even managed to jog on the treadmill for 20 minutes, not setting any records but doing much better than the medical team anticipated. However, Clarissa's irregular visits frustrated me. She often didn't bring the boys, and I only saw them 2 or 3 times a week. I longed to go home, not just to be with my boys, but also to figure out why my marriage seemed to be falling apart. During this time, Shannon became a bright spot. She visited almost every night after her shift, and she brought Bridget to see me at least twice a week. I found myself looking forward to their visits more than Clarissa's, as they were always pleasant and free of arguments. Finally, Dr. Slattery gave me the news I had been waiting for. I was going home. It was a Friday afternoon, and I would leave the next morning. I couldn't wait to share the news with Clarissa, Nick, and Jake. The boys were thrilled, but Clarissa's reaction was lukewarm. "Oh no!" she exclaimed. "Why? I thought you'd be happy," I said, confused. "The house is a mess, Patrick. I have so much to do before you come home. Laundry, groceries. I hoped they'd give us more notice," she replied, sounding upset. "Who cares about the house? I'm just happy to finally be coming home," I said. Clarissa sighed deeply and sent the boys to another room, signaling a serious conversation. "Is there any chance they could let you go tomorrow afternoon, or maybe Sunday?" she asked. I blinked, surprised. "What's going on? Why aren't you looking forward to me being home?" I pressed. Clarissa, holding back tears, explained that life hadn't stopped just because I was in the hospital. She had been overwhelmed with chores, caring for the kids, and managing bills. "Every time I visit, it feels like all you care about is coming home. Have you thought about what it's been like for me these past 7 weeks?" she asked. I responded sarcastically, "No, I guess that's because I only see you and the boys a few times a week. My friends visit more often than my own family. And have you forgotten why I'm here, Clarissa? I was helping someone in danger." Clarissa, clearly upset, grabbed her bag and said, "Just let me know when you'll be coming home." "I already told you, I'm leaving tomorrow morning. If you're not here, I'll call someone else to come get me," I called after her as she walked out. Alone in my room, I felt a mix of frustration and worry. I had fought so hard to recover, but now I feared that going home might make things worse. Just moments after Clarissa left, Shannon appeared in the doorway. "I'm so sorry, Patrick. I didn't mean to overhear," she said softly. I smiled to ease the tension. "It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong," I replied. "I've just been really stressed out lately. Do you want to sit for a moment?" Shannon hesitated, but eventually said she needed to get home to pick up Bridget from her parents' house. I quickly changed the subject to brighter news. "Hey, did you hear? I'm leaving tomorrow!" Shannon gasped in surprise. "Oh my God, that's wonderful! I want to make sure Bridget is here to see you off tomorrow morning around 10. "Yeah, I can't wait to go home and get back to work," I said, trying to stay positive. Shannon's eyes shone with tears of joy as she hugged me. The warmth of her embrace brought me a comfort I hadn't felt in a long time. We held on to each other, neither wanting to let go. As we finally parted, I whispered, "Thank you, Shannon, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." Shannon quietly replied, "No, thank you, Patrick. You helped my little girl. I can never fully repay you." The warmth of her breath made me shiver slightly. I hugged her a bit tighter, and she returned the embrace. We both knew it was time to let go and slowly released each other. As we pulled away, Shannon gently touched my face and placed a soft kiss on my cheek. "Goodbye and good night, Patrick. I'll see you in the morning." She left the room, but her presence lingered with me long after. I struggled to focus that evening as I packed my few belongings, my thoughts consumed by Shannon. Despite the excitement of going home, I couldn't stop thinking about her, which kept me awake all night. The next morning at 9:30, the nursing staff greeted me with a wheelchair. Brian, my dedicated nurse, helped me from my room to the hospital entrance. I was surprised to see hundreds of people gathered to send me off. My entire medical team, members of the Mason County Sheriff's Department, and the Red River Falls Police Department, except those on duty. A line of police cars and 2 fire trucks were ready to escort me out of town. Sheriff Bud Roberts was waiting with his department's Chevy Suburban, along with Clarissa, Nick, and Jake, who were ready to take me home. Shannon and Bridget stood nearby. I stood up from my wheelchair and lifted Bridget for one last hug as local photographers captured the moment. Bud shook my hand, all smiles for the cameras, while Clarissa tried to appear cheerful. Nick and Jake were genuinely happy to see me. Clarissa quickly got into the front passenger seat next to Bud, while I took the back seat with the boys. The parade of police and fire trucks with lights flashing and sirens blaring left the hospital as people lined the sidewalks cheering us on. As we turned onto US Highway 120, I glanced back, feeling relieved as the hospital grew smaller in the distance. Even outside the hospital, small groups of supporters with signs and banners lined the road, and Nick and Jake pointed them out excitedly. When we reached the high school on the south side of town, the police cars and fire trucks pulled into the parking lot, while Bud continued toward home. "How does the hero feel today?" Bud asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Better than I deserve," I smiled back. "I can't thank you enough for everything, Bud. I really appreciate you bringing my family here today." "Oh, it was no trouble at all, Pat. It was the least I could do," he replied, smiling at Clarissa before focusing on the road. "What did you think of all the people who came out for you? Quite something, wasn't it?" "Unbelievable," I replied. "How did everyone know I was coming home today?" "It was on the website, Dad," Nick explained. "The one they set up for you," Jake added. I was surprised to learn about the website. "It's called Caring Bridge," Nick continued. "They created it to keep everyone updated on how you were doing after your injury." "Did you make it, Clarissa?" I asked. "No, Danny Larson and some others did that," she replied. "There's even a Facebook page, Dad," Jake said proudly. "You have over 100,000 likes and more than 10,000 comments." I wasn't sure how I felt about strangers knowing about my recovery, but I was touched by the support. About 10 miles south of Red River Falls, Bud turned the SUV onto Rattlesnake Road, the gravel road leading to our land. Everything looked familiar as our small farm came into view just beyond the next hill. The sight of our house felt like reuniting with an old friend. Even the older buildings and hay shed were heartwarming sights. Bud parked the Suburban next to our garage, an old building that still kept our vehicles dry in winter. We all stepped out, and the boys and I headed to the horse corral. My loyal horse, Blackjack, trotted over and nuzzled my cheek, as if checking to see if it was really me. After some reassuring scratches behind his ears, he seemed content. I hoped my recovery would go smoothly so I could ride him before winter set in. The boys and I spent a few minutes with the horses before heading back to the house. Our farmhouse, over 80 years old, was in great shape. The main change we made since moving in was replacing the old boiler with a new, efficient one. With 5 bedrooms, we had plenty of space for all our hobbies. "Well, I should get back home," Bud said, shaking my hand firmly. "I promised my wife I'd take her out for lunch today. I'm sure you all need some time to settle in." "Thanks a lot, Bud. I really appreciate everything," I said. "No, Patrick, I appreciate all you've done. Take your time recovering and getting back to full health. The job will be fine until you're ready," Bud replied. "Please tell Margot I said hello and that we missed her today," I added. Sure, Patrick. She wanted me to let you know how happy she is for all of you, and that she'll see you soon. She had an important appointment today or she would have been here. With that, Bud turned to leave, and I didn't ask for more details. As Bud quietly left, Clarissa mentioned she was going to start lunch and headed into the kitchen. I took it easy for the rest of the weekend, knowing a full week of recovery work lay ahead. I still had about a month before I could fully return to work, but I was determined to push through. Clarissa and I were polite to each other, but it felt routine. I tried to create moments to connect, but she always had excuses. Tough days with her health, new volunteer projects, or concerns that my injuries might worsen. The tension between us kept growing. One day, I expressed my frustration, saying I was tired of the excuses. She firmly responded that her health was important too, and suggested that maybe we didn't need to prioritize closeness, as many couples focused on work and family without it. Her words stung, and I realized how distant we had become. To cope, I focused on my daily workouts and physical therapy. After a month at home, I returned to work on a limited basis, doing paperwork and helping other deputies with their reports. I also applied for the captain and chief deputy position that opened up after Floyd Franklin left. With my background in criminal justice, psychology, and military experience, plus the recognition from saving Bridget, I felt confident. The committee reviewed applications, conducted interviews, and eventually recommended me for the position. One Monday after therapy, I was at work organizing old reports when Bud approached me. He knew the work was tedious and invited me to take a break. In his office, Bud handed me the report from the selection committee. I skimmed through it and found the recommendation: Deputy Sheriff Sean Patrick Quinn for the position of Captain and Chief Deputy of the Mason County Sheriff's Department. I couldn't believe it. Although I felt confident, I knew others had applied, including Pete Sturgeon from Red River Falls PD, who might not take the news well. The weight of the new responsibility settled on me, but I was ready to take on the challenge. Pete knew that Bud and I had been friends since our days at the Red River Falls PD. Bud reached across the table with a smile. "Congratulations, Captain. I'm happy to say this was an easy decision." I shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Sheriff. I won't let you down." We talked for a few more minutes, and Bud told me the promotion would be officially announced later that afternoon, around 2:30 p.m., when the shifts changed. "Now, I bet your family would love to hear this good news," Bud added. "I'm excited to tell them," I replied, feeling a happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. "Just so you know," Bud warned with a grin, "if you think you're done with paperwork, think again. You'll be the main supervisor for all the lieutenants and deputies, and you'll also assist with the Narcotics Task Force and Special Operations Group. Plus, you'll still be preparing and serving warrants." "I know, but the regular hours and being home for dinner most nights are worth it," I said. "Congratulations, Patrick. I look forward to working with you even more closely," Bud said as he waved me out of his office. The titles Captain Pat Quinn and Chief Deputy Pat Quinn repeated in my mind, and I knew it would take time to adjust. As I returned to my desk, Bud reappeared with a more serious look. "One more thing, Pat. I'm sending you to a 2-week training course in Minneapolis. It's a special program for law enforcement officers. It'll be a good way for you to start learning at the next level." "Sounds serious," I said. "It's more about learning and thinking than anything else. Mostly classroom work with a few exercises," Bud explained. "Oh, great," I replied jokingly. "Sounds like a lot of presentations." Bud chuckled, patting my shoulder. "Welcome to the next level, Pat. Just wanted to let you know so you can tell your family you'll be away for a couple of weeks. Meals and hotel costs are covered, and I'll be there too." "That doesn't help much," I laughed. After Bud left, I returned to my work, thinking about the promotion and the upcoming training. Perhaps the 2-week break would give Clarissa and me some time to reflect. That afternoon, Sheriff Roberts gathered all the deputies and staff in the briefing room to announce my promotion to captain and chief deputy. The room applauded, though the clapping seemed a bit subdued, likely due to others who had been in the running for the job. I decided not to dwell on it and left work at 4 p.m. to head home. When I walked in, Clarissa was helping the boys with homework, and dinner was cooking. "How was work?" she asked. "Interesting," I replied, keeping it mysterious. "Oh? How so? I thought you were stuck with old paperwork," she said, puzzled. "I was, but something happened just before noon." Are you going to tell me, or will it be like 20 questions? She asked eagerly. I hung my jacket on a chair and said, The selection committee recommended me to Bud for the captain and chief deputy role, and he accepted. What? Chief deputy? Clarissa looked surprised. That's like second in command, right? Yes, exactly. It goes sheriff, then me, I confirmed. Are you not happy about this? I asked, noticing her hesitation. No, it's just, wow, she stammered. Do I at least get a hug for my promotion? I asked, opening my arms. She hugged me, but it was brief, and she quickly stepped back, looking uncertain. There will be some changes, I explained. My hours will be more like office hours, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., but I might need to come in early or stay late sometimes. I'll get extra time off for that, but there will also be more meetings, even on weekends. Will you usually know about changes in advance? Clarissa asked. Most of the time, yes, but sometimes things come up. I may also need to travel for work occasionally. I'll be gone for 2 weeks in early November for a leadership training seminar. How often will you have to travel? She asked. It's hard to say, I replied, grabbing a soda from the fridge. Some parts of the job will be routine and I'll learn as I go. Clarissa paused. What about the more difficult parts? She asked. Well, most of that is behind me. I won't be patrolling anymore. No more car stops or chasing after anyone. My job now includes overseeing the Narcotics Task Force and Special Operations Team. So you'll still deal with that kind of work? She asked, looking worried. Not quite, I reassured her. As the officer in charge, I'll be focused on planning and overseeing. Sure, I'll still dress for the job just in case something unexpected happens, but I won't be out on the front lines like before. Good, she said, sounding relieved. Will you get a nice pay raise with this new role? I chuckled, almost spilling my drink. You sure get straight to the point, I said, wiping my chin. Well, I figured your pay would go up with more responsibilities. They better pay you more, Clarissa said. I gently responded, Calm down. My salary as a patrol deputy was just over $55,000 a year. The chief deputy makes $89,000 a year. Wow, Clarissa said, surprised. I expected a raise, but not that much. I explained, it's a significant promotion, considering I was chosen over the sergeants and lieutenants. Later, we all sat down for dinner, discussing my new job. For the first time in a long while, our home felt warm and inviting. Clarissa even cuddled up next to me in bed, giving me a sweet goodnight hug. It was nice to feel that closeness again after such a long time. I didn't push for anything more over the next week, but as the law enforcement conference in the Twin Cities approached, I started to feel nervous. I brought home flowers for Clarissa, and she accepted them with a smile, which was a relief since she had started viewing romantic gestures with doubt over the past year. Finally, the night before I was to leave for the conference, I couldn't ignore the distance between us any longer. It had been over 5 months since we had shared any real closeness. I was worried that if I left without connecting, our relationship would remain strained. While packing, Clarissa came into the room looking for something. I walked up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. She didn't pull away but placed her hands on mine, accepting the embrace. I leaned in closer and whispered, Clarissa, I really want to connect before I go. Patrick, please don't, she replied, moving away slightly. I felt confused and frustrated. What's wrong? I asked. Clarissa sat on the edge of the bed, arms crossed and looking away. What do you expect from me, Clarissa? Why have things changed between us over the years? I could ask you the same thing, she shot back. What do you want from me? It feels like you want me to stay home, handle everything, and do whatever you say. Clarissa, I said, trying to stay calm, if we shared a moment together now and then, I might consider your feelings. And that's a big might, she replied. You're not the only one affected by everything lately. This has affected me too. Do you know what it's like to feel so alone before I'm even 35? To think about facing the future on my own with 2 boys to care for? Don't use the boys as an excuse, Clarissa, I said quietly. We're talking about problems that have been going on for years. This isn't just about what happened recently. I'm sorry, Patrick, she sighed dramatically. I'm sorry my needs seem less important than your need for connection. She waved her hands in frustration. Did you ever think about what's best for me? Yes, I have. And what's best for you would be to talk to your doctor and consider treatment. Seeking help is okay, Clarissa, I tried to explain. I don't want to take pills and medications, Patrick, she replied. You know how those things affect me. It sounds like you're making excuses. I'm tired of this, and I shouldn't have to keep asking for something that should be a normal part of our marriage. If you really cared about me, Clarissa, I said as I continued packing, you would try to solve this instead of making excuses. And if you cared about me, she replied sharply, you would want what feels right for me and not push me into things that make me uneasy. You're only thinking about yourself and what you want. Exhausted from the situation, I decided to use the 2 weeks in the Twin Cities to think about my next steps when I returned. If this was how my life was going to be, I didn't want any part of it. Living in the country wasn't worth being unhappy, and I realized that losing the property seemed likely if we ended up getting a divorce. Instead of fear, I felt a strange sense of calm as I accepted this possibility. Clarissa noticed my silence as I continued to pack. Finally, she asked, "What, Patrick? What do you want from me?" I paused, stood tall, and took a deep breath. "I'll tell you what I want, Clarissa," I said, sitting next to her. "I want a relationship where both of us feel valued. I want us to show each other kindness and care. I want a partner who appreciates my gestures and doesn't always think there's something else behind them. I want someone who feels comfortable with my affection. I want someone who doesn't push me away when I want to be close because I love her." After almost 15 years of being married, I still see her as beautiful as when we first met. I want my wife back, the woman I fell in love with, not a version of her who feels distant and can't share warmth with me. Lately, you feel like just a memory of the woman I loved. I keep wishing she'll come back, but each day that hope slips a little more. I stood up, zipped my suitcase, and placed it by the bedroom door. I hung my suits and uniforms behind the door, making sure they were neat. Clarissa sat silently, tears in her eyes. I had hoped she would say something, but instead, the silence continued. "You'll have the bed to yourself for the next couple of weeks," I said gently. "So you might as well enjoy it tonight." Clarissa just sat there, tears streaming down her face. I took some blankets and a pillow from the hall closet and went downstairs to the living room, trying to make myself comfortable on the couch. My alarm went off at 4:30 the next morning. The conference wasn't set to start until 10 o'clock, so I had enough time to take a shower, get dressed, and head out. I decided to use the main bathroom instead of the master bath to let Clarissa sleep. After my shower, I dressed in khaki pants, a dress shirt, a tie, and a tan blazer I had bought for the occasion. I paired it with the brown leather boots I had treated myself to after my promotion. Since becoming captain, Bud had insisted I wear suits to work instead of my usual uniform. Once I finished packing my clothes into the car, I went back inside to give each of my boys a quick kiss on the head. They were still sleeping, and I didn't want to wake them. I had promised to call them that night and regularly while I was away. My new work vehicle, a silver unmarked Ford Crown Victoria from 2013, was equipped with the standard police interceptor package, shocks, brakes, and a powerful engine, but without the large radio, light setup, or computer. As I was about to leave, I noticed Clarissa standing at the front door in her pajamas and robe. I hesitated, thinking about getting out of the car to talk, but something stopped me. I was afraid that if I approached her, I might embarrass myself trying to fix things from the night before, or she might give me some hope that would linger while I was gone. Instead, I sat for a moment, then put the car in gear and drove out of the driveway onto Rattlesnake Road. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Clarissa still standing by the front door as I drove over the hill. As I approached US Highway 120, I wondered if that might be the last time I would see my home before deciding about my marriage. The drive from my house near Red River Falls to the Twin Cities took over 3 hours. I managed to avoid rush hour traffic and made good time getting to the hotel, where the conference was being held. Thankfully, I wouldn't have to travel far during my stay. The sheriff's department covered my room, meals, and provided money for dry cleaning and laundry. Since Bud Roberts was also attending, I decided to check on his room when I reached the front desk. It was just after 9 a.m., and there was still some time before the conference began. "I'm sorry," the desk clerk said. "I don't see anyone by that name registered here." "Really?" I replied, confused. "His full name is William Roberts. Perhaps there's a Will or Bill Roberts." The clerk typed on his computer. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't have anyone with that last name staying here right now. There's no reservation under that name either." That was odd. I thought maybe Bud had chosen another hotel. I decided I'd catch up with him at the conference. I took my things up to the 8th floor where my room was. Inside, I found a spacious king-size bed, a pull-out sofa, a nice bathroom with a jacuzzi, a small desk with Wi-Fi, a large TV, a microwave, a fridge, and a coffee maker. It seemed like a comfortable place to stay for the next 2 weeks. At 9:45, I headed down to the conference center. Although I wasn't in formal clothes, it was clear I was a police officer. I had a small badge pin on my right side, an American flag on my left, and my sheriff's badge visible on my belt. Some attendees were in uniform, but most were dressed like me. The conference brochure stated that guns were not allowed on hotel property and no excuses would be accepted. As I signed in at the registration table, I noticed Bud's name tag, which meant he hadn't checked in yet. I decided to wait near the entrance of the main conference hall for him to arrive. It felt a bit uncomfortable standing there with a pile of materials for the 2 weeks ahead. At 9:55, Bud still hadn't arrived, so I took a seat. The conference began promptly at 10 o'clock with a keynote speaker, a retired deputy police commissioner from Chicago, who spoke until 11:45. After a short lunch break, the afternoon session was set to begin at 1:15. I left the conference room and walked into the hotel lobby to call Bud and see where he was. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Bud Roberts," he said. "Hey, Bud, it's Patrick. Where are you? I missed you at registration." "Hi, Patrick. I'm dealing with something here," he replied. "I have an emergency meeting with the county supervisors. They're discussing next year's budget and making some tough choices. I need to talk some sense into them. I hope to make it to the conference by tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest. How's it going for you there?" "Oh, it's going fine, I guess," I said. "We only had the first session this morning with a former deputy commissioner from Chicago who talked about leadership and planning. Just the usual motivational stuff," I said, pacing around the lobby. "Well, it should be a good experience for you, Pat. I'm sure you'll bring back plenty of ideas we can use," he said, which felt strange, like he didn't plan to join me at all. "Anyway, wish me luck with the supervisors. Hope to see you later this week. Bye." "Yeah, take care," I replied, hanging up the phone. Great, my home life was a mess, and I had hoped to talk to a friend about it while I was here, but it looked like I'd have to handle my feelings on my own for the next few days, unless Bud decided to show up. I had a late lunch in one of the hotel's smaller restaurants. A few other conference attendees were eating there too, but I chose a small table by myself to think. The afternoon session lasted from 1:15 to 4:30, marking the end of the first day of the conference. I attended an evening mixer in one of the banquet halls, enjoying a drink while chatting with other attendees. I recognized a few people. The world of law enforcement can feel small at times, and you often meet officers from different places. Most of the attendees were from Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Wisconsin, but a few had come all the way from Denver, Colorado. For a few hours, I found comfort being around fellow police officers. Around 8:30 p.m., I headed back to my room and called home to talk to the boys. We chatted for about half an hour. Nick mentioned wanting to play basketball that winter and asked if we could shop for new basketball shoes when I got back. Jake, feeling left out, shared that he was upset he didn't get to play too. I promised Jake that I would buy him a pair of basketball shoes as well, and that I would put up a basketball hoop in the barn so we could practice indoors during winter. Even as I made the promise, I wondered if I could keep it. Still, Jake felt better and said he would stop being annoyed with his brother. Nick got back on the phone to say goodbye, and after I finished talking with Jake, Nick asked, "Dad, do you want to talk to Mom?" I hesitated and then said, "I just wanted to catch up with you boys tonight." "Are you and Mom upset with each other?" Nick asked, his question hitting me like a punch to the stomach, even from miles away. "Why do you say that?" I replied, trying to sound calm. "Kids can be more aware of things than we think," he said softly. "Don't worry," I said, trying to reassure him. "There's nothing you need to be concerned about." "Then why don't you want to talk to Mom?" he pressed. "Well," I explained, "your mom and I talk a lot. We chatted last night, and I saw her this morning before I left. It wasn't entirely true, but I hoped it would be enough for now." "Okay then. Will you call tomorrow?" Nick asked. "Of course I will, buddy. I'm looking forward to it." Now get some sleep. You'll need it if you decide to play basketball, I encouraged him. Okay, Dad. Talk to you tomorrow. Love you. I love you too, little buddy. Give your mom and your brother a hug for me, okay? I promise, he said. Good night, I replied as I hung up. Even the kids could sense the tension. Things needed to improve between my wife and me, and soon. The question was whether they would get better or worse. I figured I wouldn't know until I got home next week. Sleep came faster than I expected, helped a bit by the drink I had enjoyed at the conference mixer. I was relieved when Bud finally arrived the next morning. He had gotten a room at a nearby motel for some reason, but we still managed to have breakfast and lunch together at my hotel. In the evenings, Bud spent time with other police chiefs and sheriffs who were at the conference, some of whom he already knew and others he met there. A large group gathered for drinks and dinner each evening, which was fine. It was nice to have a friend around. I didn't talk much about my issues back home. Trying to maintain a good image for my boss seemed wise. I had decided before the conference that I would leave my problems behind. Either things between Clarissa and me would get better while I was away, or they wouldn't. If they didn't, it would probably make my next steps easier. Bud and I sat next to each other during the class sessions, but didn't talk much. During breaks, Bud focused on networking, shaking hands, and building connections. He told me that to be sheriff, you had to be a bit like a politician and know how to work with other officials. In Mason County, that meant dealing with the Board of Supervisors, the same group that had caused him to be late for the conference. There were only 3 of them, but Bud said each one was hard to handle. The next 3 days at the conference passed quickly. The weekend sessions were only in the morning, allowing the attendees to explore the Twin Cities. We even looked forward to a group trip to watch the Minnesota Wild play at the Cell Energy Center on Friday. At lunch that day, just as we were about to order, Bud got a phone call. He stepped away for about 10 minutes and returned, looking upset. "Bad news, Pat," he said as he sat down. "I need to leave right away. There's more trouble with the supervisors. If I don't meet them, they won't put the new jail plan on the ballot next year." "Really? Can they do that?" I asked. "For sure," Bud replied, sipping his coffee. "Anything that goes to a county election needs their approval first, and we really need that new jail." I understood Bud's situation. He was right about the need for a new jail. A lot of the budget for corrections was going to house prisoners in jails outside the county. Some were placed as far away as Choctaw County, even though we had space. Others were in Lakota and Iroquois counties, which charged Mason County around $80 a day per prisoner. Right now, we had 10 prisoners in Lakota County staying an average of 10 days each, costing taxpayers about $800 daily, $5,600 weekly, and over $20,000 monthly, just for that one county. Still, it seemed strange that Bud had to leave right then. By the time he fought through the busy afternoon traffic in Minneapolis, it would be late before he got home. I knew a lawman's work was never done, but something about the timing bothered me. The Friday sessions ended at 4:30 as usual, and I went straight to my room to change. I decided to check out the Mall of America and visit a store called Legoland, which one of the other attendees had mentioned. Nick and Jake were big Lego fans, and I thought I'd bring them something special as a sorry I was gone for 2 weeks gift. When I arrived at my hotel room, I noticed a blinking light on the hotel phone indicating I had a message. I picked up the phone and called the front desk. "Front desk, this is Adam," a voice said on the line. "Hi, this is Patrick Quinn in room 832. Do you have a message for me?" I asked. "One moment, please," the clerk said as he checked for the message. "Mr. Quinn?" "Yes, that's me," I replied. "I have a message for you." The hotel clerk informed me that Miss Carolyn Bennett had called, asking me to return her call as soon as possible. Caroline, my mother-in-law? What could she want? I hadn't seen much of her since she moved to the city. Scribbling down the number, I paused, unsure what to make of this unexpected call. My relationship with Caroline had always been straightforward, but a sweltering day in August had stirred up unexpected feelings. Now, here I was, miles away from home, in the same city where she lived with her new partner. This could only lead to trouble, I thought. Yet, I couldn't stop myself from dialing her number. As the phone rang, anxiety built up inside me. After almost 5 rings, a woman's voice answered. "Hello? Caroline?" I asked hesitantly. "Patrick, I'm so glad you called back," she replied, genuinely happy. "Well, I just finished the afternoon session of the conference and thought I'd call before heading out for dinner," I said. "Oh no, did you have plans?" she asked. "Not really," I stammered. "There are several places to eat in the hotel and the Mall of America is close by." "Oh, please stay away from the mall. It's just an overpriced tourist trap," she laughed. "Even the airport looks better than that place." "Okay," I chuckled. "If you say so." "Speaking of dinner," she continued, "if you don't have plans tonight, Martin and I would love to take you out. It's been a while and I want to hear all about Clarissa and the boys." "Well," I said, "that sounds good. Where should we meet?" "I hope you don't mind," she started, "but I made a reservation at Chez Stéphane." Chez Stéphane was a fancy restaurant in the hotel, not a place I would usually consider due to my budget. The kind of place where prices weren't listed on the menu because, if you had to ask, you probably shouldn't be there. "That's a bit too fancy for me," I said. "Don't be silly. You came all this way and you deserve a nice welcome and a meal like a king. Martin and I will take care of you while you're here. I won't hear any arguments. Your money isn't needed as long as you're with us." I sighed, realizing she wouldn't take no for an answer. "All right, Caroline, you win. I'm looking forward to seeing you and meeting Martin. When should I be there?" "Martin and I will arrive for drinks around 8 o'clock and we have dinner booked for 8:30. Martin doesn't like to eat early and neither do I," she replied. "Great. 8 it is. I'll see you then," I said, preparing to end the call. "Perfect. Oh, and Patrick," she added, hesitating. "Yes," I answered. There was a brief pause before she spoke again. "I'm really excited to see you tonight," she said, her voice filled with eagerness. "Me too," was all I could think to say. "Okay. See you soon," she said warmly. I hung up the phone and sighed deeply. Caroline had sounded so excited, but excited for what? It couldn't be anything too serious. She was bringing her new man along, after all. I doubted it could be more than a friendly catch-up, but still, the thought nagged at me. What was really going on? I tried to push those thoughts away as I took a long, hot shower, focusing instead on making a good impression at dinner. I decided to wear my dark gray suit, a blue patterned tie, and freshly polished shoes. After cleaning up and dressing sharply, I felt ready for whatever the evening had in store. Arriving at Chez Stéphane just before 8 o'clock, I was greeted by a maitre d' who gave me a once-over, clearly sizing me up. His eyes lingered on the badge on my belt, and I could tell he thought I didn't belong there. "Welcome to Chez Stéphane, sir. How may I assist you?" he asked with a forced smile, not even bothering to ask if I had a reservation. "I'm waiting for some people," I said. "Perhaps you could wait outside for your group." He suggested. "Is there any reason I can't wait inside?" I asked, feeling a bit insulted. "I'm sorry, sir, but Chez Stéphane only accepts reservations, and all our tables are full for the rest of the night," he started to say, but was interrupted. "Patrick!" Caroline's voice called out. The maitre d' immediately straightened up, clearly recognizing her and the man with her. "Patrick!" she called again, giving me a warm hug. "It's great to see you too, Caroline," I replied, and it truly was. Caroline looked fantastic for someone just under 55. Her hair was freshly styled, and she wore a lovely black velvet dress that fit her perfectly. The dress fell just below her knees, and she had on nice ankle boots and a stunning string of pearls. Her perfume was delightful, a new scent that was captivating. Her makeup was perfect, making her look so amazing that younger women would have envied her. Behind Caroline was a gentleman who was almost as tall as me, but appeared to weigh a good 40 to 50 pounds more. He seemed to be in his late 50s or early 60s, with a round face, glasses, and clean-shaven with little hair. He didn't try to hide his baldness and seemed comfortable with it. He appeared lively and cheerful, with the personality of a warm-hearted salesman. He was dressed sharply in a custom suit that likely cost a fortune. "Patrick," Caroline said, linking her arm with the man's. "I want you to meet Martin." "Martin, this is my Patrick," she said with a big smile. When Caroline introduced me to Martin, calling me her Patrick, it caught me off guard. "Pleased to meet you," Martin said warmly as we shook hands. "I'm Martin Belmont. It's a real pleasure to finally meet you, Sheriff. I've heard a lot about you, and I'm truly impressed with your work for that little girl." "Just doing my job," I replied, feeling a bit shy about the compliment. but Martin's easygoing manner made it hard not to like him. "Oh, such humility," Martin laughed. "I could never do what you do. I really respect the hard work of law enforcement. It's an honor to have you as our guest tonight." "After you," I said, holding the door open and giving the maitre d' a subtle, satisfied look. The maitre d' quickly switched to full-service mode. "Mr. Belmont, Miss Bennett, we're delighted to have you back at Chez Stephan. Please follow me. Your table is ready in the bar, and dinner will be served at 8:30, he said, picking up 3 leather-bound drink menus. The bar was beautifully decorated, exuding a sense of elegance and sophistication. Martin, clearly knowledgeable about wine, ordered a bottle of 1969 Cabernet Sauvignon without even glancing at the menu. When the maitre d' asked for my order, I chose a pint of Killian's Irish Red. He seemed slightly surprised that I opted for beer in such a refined setting, but I wasn't much of a wine drinker. As we settled into our seats, a friendly waitress brought Martin's wine and my beer. The beer was icy cold, with foam spilling down the side. "Wow!" Martin laughed. "I don't usually drink beer, but that looks great." "I can only imagine the price of that wine," I said with a smile. "This is definitely the nicest bar and restaurant I've ever been to," I added, admiring the marble surroundings. "Caroline and I come here about once a month," Martin explained. "The drinks are fantastic, the service is top-notch, and the food is wonderful." Over the next 20 minutes, we got to know Martin better. He was a successful real estate developer in Minneapolis, with projects all over the Twin Cities and beyond. He had built luxury apartments in downtown Minneapolis that earned millions in rent each month. A self-made man from St. Cloud, Martin's achievements were impressive. At 8:30, we were led to a private table near a piano, where a musician played soft, relaxing tunes. The atmosphere was perfect, and the food was excellent. I ordered stuffed crab, which was incredible. Martin insisted we have dessert, so we all chose chocolate mousse, something Clarissa would have loved. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, but Martin's engaging stories soon pulled me back into the conversation. Despite their differences, Martin and Caroline clearly enjoyed each other's company. Their connection worked in a way that was surprising but genuine. We stayed at the restaurant until nearly 11:30. As we were about to part ways, Martin said, "Well, I think I've had enough excitement for one evening. I've shared plenty of stories with poor Patrick." As we walked through the lobby, Martin stopped and shook my hand again. "Patrick, it's been a true joy to finally meet you. Your work as a lawman is legendary, and I have great respect for you." "Thank you, Martin," I replied. "That's very kind of you." "It's the truth, Patrick. It really is," he said, turning to Caroline. They exchanged a warm smile before Martin headed toward the hotel's main doors, where his car and driver were waiting. "Isn't he amazing?" Caroline asked, linking her arm with mine as we walked toward the elevator. "Yeah, he really is," I replied, still surprised by the evening. As we entered the elevator, Caroline's words caught me off guard. "You're probably curious about what's happening next, aren't you?" "That's putting it mildly," I admitted as the elevator doors closed. "Martin and I have a special relationship," she began. "We each bring what the other really needs." "Oh, how does that work?" I asked, intrigued. Martin was feeling lonely. He wanted someone who could appreciate him for who he is, she explained. "He's very influential and has made many friends and some enemies across the country. There's nothing he can't do if he really tries." "And you?" I asked, trying to understand. "I meet Martin's need for someone important in his life, someone who connects with him socially and intellectually. While I may not bring money to our relationship, I know how to navigate his social circles," she said, squeezing my arm a little tighter. Caroline's words hung in the air, and I could sense there was more to her story. "I have a feeling there's a but coming," I said cautiously. She looked away, her expression shifting. "Well, Patrick, when something seems perfect, there's often a twist," she admitted. The elevator arrived at my floor and we walked down the hall to my room. I opened the door and she stepped inside, commenting lightly on how cozy the room was. It was clear that what I considered luxurious was modest to her. As she continued, Caroline revealed that Martin had significant health issues, heart problems, high blood pressure, and diabetes. His health complications made intimacy challenging, and despite their efforts, it was impossible for Martin to manage. So I assume you and Martin have an understanding, I guessed. Yes, she confirmed, her voice soft as she brushed her foot against my thigh. He knows I still have strong emotional needs and understands that he can't fulfill all of them. He's supportive of me finding ways to feel fulfilled, as long as I'm honest with him. So Martin knows you're here with me tonight, I concluded. Yes, she whispered. At first he hesitated because you're my son-in-law, but I told him about our past, and he saw how much those memories still mean to me. He encouraged me to spend time with you tonight. The atmosphere between us grew charged as Caroline and I embraced, the moment filled with anticipation. We shared an undeniable connection, a bond that had been growing over time. As we held each other, the warmth of our closeness wrapped around us, creating a serene moment that needed no words. After a while, we lay together, savoring the quiet comfort of being with someone who truly understood. Our connection deepened, and as we shared a soft kiss, the intensity of the moment enveloped us. We rested in each other's arms, enjoying the rhythm of our hearts beating together. In the soft light of the room, we continued to share our time together, finding peace in the closeness we had built. The bond between us was strong, and as we held each other, we knew that this moment of understanding and connection would stay with us, lingering in the warmth of our embrace. Caroline's tenderness was captivating, and as our special moment continued, she playfully suggested a change. "Patrick," she said with a teasing tone, "I want you to do that thing you did earlier." "What was that?" I asked, smiling. "The way you touched me before. It felt so nice," she replied warmly. "Of course," I said, kneeling beside the bed to ensure she was comfortable. We continued our gentle moments, each gesture filled with care and affection. Caroline responded with warmth, her movements reflecting the deep bond we shared. Finally, I paused, letting the tenderness linger. Her reaction was instant, her voice full of warmth as she said, "Oh, Patrick, that feels so nice." Hearing her happiness filled me with a strong sense of connection, and we continued to enjoy our closeness, feeling our bond grow stronger with every moment. Caroline then made a soft yet eager request. "Oh, Patrick, please hold me close now." I stood beside the bed, ready to embrace the sweet moment, warmed by our connection. "Are you sure?" I asked gently, wanting to ensure she was comfortable. "I don't mind," she whispered, her voice full of trust. "I've never felt this before, and I want to explore it with you." Caroline then took out a small bottle from her purse. "Here, let's share this experience, Patrick." I followed her lead, careful and attentive as we prepared ourselves. Caroline focused on making sure everything was ready, and I proceeded with care, ensuring she felt relaxed. Together, we found a rhythm that felt right for both of us. Caroline offered kind words of support, letting me know she was enjoying the moment. "You're doing really well, Patrick." "Just like that," she whispered. We continued to share this tender experience, both of us in tune with each other's needs. It was a special moment, filled with respect and care. Eventually, we reached a point where our connection felt complete. As we lay together, a sense of calm settled in the room. Then, Caroline turned to me with a more serious look, reached for my hand, and pulled me into a tighter hug. "Oh, Patrick," she sighed. "I wish it could always be like this." "Yeah, I know," I responded softly. "No, I don't think you understand," she said. "I wish you lived closer so I could see you more often and that we could have moments like this more frequently." "We're only about 3.5 hours away. It really isn't too far," I said, trying to reassure her. "You don't get it, Patrick. It's not just about distance," she replied, her voice heavy. I felt a wave of concern. "What do you mean?" "You might not like me when I tell you," she said, her tone more serious now. "Nothing could make me dislike you, Caroline," I assured her. She turned to me, her gaze steady. "Patrick, you're a great person. I love my daughter deeply, but it hurts me to think about how she's treated you. If I were younger, I would have wished to be with someone like you." Feeling shy, I looked away. "No, Patrick, it's true. I want you to understand how much I care because what I need to say next might be hard for you." "What are you trying to say, Caroline? What does this mean?" I asked, confused. "Oh, Patrick, just know how much you mean to me. Even if I can't show it again in my life, there is someone who believes in you, who cares about you and values you," she said gently. I think I understand, I replied softly, wanting to comfort her. But really, what are you trying to tell me? She sighed heavily. What I need to share will be very hard for you, but you deserve to know this because you are too good a person to be treated like this. Clarissa and I are going through a tough time, I admitted, but I believe we can work through it. I've asked her to take these 2 weeks to really think things over, and I have hope she will figure things out. Oh, Patrick, she said with sympathy, you are so kind for believing that. I wish I could say you're right, but please don't be upset with me for saying this. Clarissa is not being faithful. It felt like my world just shook. No way, that can't be true. You're mistaken, I said, sitting up straight. Clarissa has her own problems. If she can't even talk to me, how could she be with someone else? It isn't a stranger, Patrick, she replied softly. Often the most hurtful betrayals come from those closest to us. In this case, it involves your wife and someone you know. My thoughts were racing. Who? Who could it be? I can't say for sure, but I talk to Clarissa almost every night. Even though we've had our moments, she is still my daughter and I know her well. I moved to the edge of the bed, my mind spinning. Caroline sat up next to me and wrapped her arms around me for comfort. This can't be happening, I stammered. Nothing makes sense. Betrayals never do, Patrick, but if it helps, my daughter's actions started long before that day at your farm last year. What? I asked, surprised. You knew she was being unfaithful? Is that why you reached out to me? I'm really sorry, Patrick, Caroline said softly. I felt awful and embarrassed that Clarissa would hurt you. I was going through my own troubles with another divorce. Her words echoed in my mind, and the reality of the situation began to sink in. My world felt like it was crumbling, and the person I thought I could trust the most was the one who had betrayed me. Caroline's gentle touch on my cheek was comforting, yet her words weighed heavily on me. Patrick, you are a good man, and you don't deserve this. Just like I didn't deserve it with Dale, you don't deserve it from Clarissa. As I struggled to piece together everything that had happened over the past few years, I began to wonder if Clarissa's refusal to address her health issues was a way to avoid being close to me. I felt overwhelmed by the distance she had created, especially during the times I needed her most. Her lack of support while I was in the hospital and her constant focus on the boys' schooling seemed to pull her further away from our shared responsibilities. The frequent absences and her time spent on the computer made me question what was really going on. Were her weekends with friends real, or were they just an escape? I couldn't pinpoint when it all began, but moving to the farm seemed to mark a shift in our relationship. Clarissa's refusal to seek help only deepened my doubts. I think I'm going to be sick, I muttered. Patrick, listen to me, Caroline said firmly, trying to steady me. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. What happened between us? What's happening with Clarissa? It's not your fault. Who could it be? Do you have any idea? I asked, still trying to grasp the reality of the situation. Caroline shook her head. No, I don't know who it is, but it's someone close to you. Maybe someone you work with or a friend, someone from church. That's impossible, I said, disbelief washing over me. None of the guys I work with would do something like that, and we hardly socialize outside of work. I'm so sorry, Patrick, Caroline said, her voice softening as she leaned in to give me a brief, comforting touch. Please don't think poorly of me for being here tonight. I just needed to share this moment with you and remind you of who you are. You deserve to know the truth. I appreciate that, Caroline, I replied sincerely. Really, I do. I just wish we could stay like this forever, but I have so much to sort out. Caroline nodded, understanding the weight of the situation. I know. That's why this has to be our last moment together, Patrick. Clarissa will always be my daughter, and she and my grandsons will always come first. If things go as I think they will, you and Clarissa might end up getting a divorce, even if you try to make up. What we've shared will only complicate things. Without complete honesty, any chance of making things work is doomed. She was right. Trust was already fragile between Clarissa and me, and any chance of rebuilding it would shatter if the truth about Caroline and me came out. My marriage had already suffered 2 serious blows, one from Clarissa and now one from me. Caroline called Martin to let him know she needed to stay the night so we could talk. She made it clear to him that this was the end for us, and he reluctantly agreed. We spent the night talking, enjoying each other's company, and not falling asleep until almost 8 a.m. I didn't bother attending the Saturday session of the conference, knowing I wouldn't be there for the rest of it. We both slept until early afternoon and shared a gentle goodbye moment. It was warm and left us both feeling a bit lighter. After a final shower together, so Caroline could look nice for Martin, I walked her down to the lobby and helped her into a waiting taxi. I stood at the hotel entrance, watching her drive away until the cab disappeared from view. I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever see my mother-in-law again. Overwhelmed with emotions, I quickly packed my things, threw everything into the back seat of the Crown Vic, and pulled out of the parking lot. My only thought was to get home and face whatever lay ahead. The uneasy feeling in my stomach matched my gloomy mood perfectly. As I drove, I started to wonder what my life would be like from now on. How would this change my relationship with my kids? How would it affect my job, my friendships? I had so many questions and no answers. About an hour west of Minneapolis, I decided to call Sheriff Roberts. I planned to tell him that a family issue had come up and that I needed to be home, but that I would try to return to the conference if I could. I hoped that would satisfy Bud for now, giving me time to think of a better reason over the next day or so. After all, the department and the county were spending a lot for me to be at the conference, and I didn't want to let Bud down, especially being so new to the job. I grabbed my department phone and pressed the speed dial for Bud's cell. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. This wasn't unusual, as Bud often liked to be unavailable for a few hours each weekend when he was with his wife, Margolin. She was about my mother-in-law's age and, although still attractive, didn't compare to Caroline. I decided it was important enough to try calling his house phone. After a few rings, Margolin answered, her voice warm and familiar. "Hello? Margolin, it's Patrick Quinn," I said. "Oh, Patrick, how's the conference going in the big city?" she asked, her tone friendly and upbeat. "It's going well, lots to learn," I replied, avoiding the truth. Before I could say more, Margolin added, "Bud says he's learning more at the hotel bar, just chatting with other police chiefs and sheriffs. He mentioned you two are going to the hockey game tonight." I froze. "I'm sorry, what was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Bud says everyone does more networking after hours than during the sessions. He said you two are going to the game tonight," she repeated, her voice filled with casual cheer. A chill ran through me as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Margolin had no idea Bud wasn't at the conference anymore. My mind raced. If Bud wasn't in Minneapolis, where could he be? The only place that made sense was my house. "Patrick, are you still there?" Margolin's voice brought me back to the moment. "Yes, sorry, it's been a long day. I must have dialed the wrong number for Bud," I said, trying to sound normal. "Oh, okay. Well, tell Bud to call me when you see him. It's almost dinner time, right?" she asked. "Yeah, dinner," I echoed, my voice strained. I needed to end the call. "I should go. Sorry about the mix-up." I hung up before she could say anything else. I spotted a truck stop up ahead and knew I needed to pull over. My thoughts were spinning, and I needed a moment to collect myself. I parked at the truck stop and went into the diner, heading straight for the bathroom to splash some water on my face. The cold water did little to calm my nerves, so I ordered a large coffee and sat in a booth, trying to process everything. Caroline had hinted that something was off with Clarissa for over a year, and now it all started to make sense. If Bud wasn't at the conference, it could only mean one thing. He was likely at my house with my wife. The realization hit me hard. How had I missed the signs? I felt a mix of anger and embarrassment. After an hour and too much coffee, I was calm enough to get back on the road. I should have eaten something, but my stomach was in knots. 2 hours later, I was back in Mason County. As I approached Rattlesnake Road, I pulled over to gather my thoughts. If Bud was at my house, I needed to prepare for what I might find. I turned off the headlights and carefully drove up the hill until I could see the farmhouse. Parking the car at the edge of the driveway, I walked the rest of the way. There, under the yard light, was a big white SUV parked in front of the garage. The downstairs lights were on, but the shades were drawn and there were no lights on upstairs. I crept closer, peeking through the windows for any sign of movement. Then I saw them. Clarissa in a nightgown and open bathrobe, and Bud dressed casually. They looked relaxed, almost cozy together, but it felt wrong. I watched as they seemed to have a small disagreement, then Clarissa leaned in to hug Bud. My heart pounded with anger as I pushed open the front door, catching them off guard. Bud instinctively moved to put Clarissa between us. "Patrick!" Clarissa exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. "What are you doing here?" Bud looked equally startled. "You were supposed to be in Minneapolis," he said, trying to keep his composure. "Yeah, so were you, Bud," I replied, my voice cold as I moved closer to them. The anger inside me was rising fast. "Hold on, Patrick," Bud said, raising a hand as if to calm me down. "This isn't what you think." I paused, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Really, Bud? You think I can't see what's happening here?" Bud stammered. "No, Patrick, it's not like that. I wouldn't have hired you if I didn't trust you." "Right," I said, my voice tight with rage, "because it sure looks like my longtime friend and boss is involved with my wife." Clarissa said nothing, just stepped back from Bud, her head hanging low. "Patrick," Bud tried again. "I regret that you had to find out like this." "Oh, thanks for the apology, Bud," I shot back. "But tell me, how long has this been going on?" "It's not what you think," Clarissa finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "It's more than that." Bud, sensing he needed to take control, added, "Patrick, we care about each other. We plan to be together once everything settles down." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. The betrayal was complete, and there was no going back. "What do you mean, once everything settles down? When did this start? How long has this been happening?" I demanded, my frustration boiling over. Bud sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "This began before I hired you, Patrick." I was stunned. "I started working for you almost 2 years ago." "Yeah, that's right. This has to stop," I insisted. "It needs to stop now." Bud shook his head. "That's not going to happen." Clarissa remained silent, tears streaming down her face. "Why not?" I pressed. "Because this will end with Clarissa and me together, Patrick," Bud replied coldly. "It will end when I say it does, not you. We already have plans." "Oh," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Care to share those plans with me?" Bud moved closer, his tone firm. "Clarissa and I love each other. We have for quite some time. I'll keep you in your role until after the election next fall. Then I'll announce my separation, and Clarissa will do the same. After things calm down, we'll move forward with our relationship." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And what about me? How are you going to explain to everyone that you're involved with my wife? What if I tell Margolin about this? She thinks you're at a conference." Bud's expression darkened. "Margolin won't find out because you won't tell her. My relationship with Clarissa won't be revealed until after you and she have separated. I've taken care of everything. There's no way this ends with you and Clarissa still together." "Really? How do you plan to stop me?" I challenged. "Patrick, I have ways to make sure that doesn't happen. Most of them are already in place. I have reports and complaints just waiting to be used. If I think for a second that you're not following the plan, I'll make sure your career suffers. You're the chief deputy now, with a lot of responsibility. You oversee budgets and investigations. There might be some issues from your past that have now come to light because of your current position." "You've thought this through, haven't you?" I said, feeling anger rise within me. Bud nodded. "I didn't become sheriff by being careless." I felt betrayed. "Why would you do this to a friend, Bud?" Bud looked momentarily regretful. "I regret that you and Clarissa are married. It makes this harder, but I've liked her for a long time." He stepped closer to Clarissa, adding tension to the room. "I decided I wanted to be with her and that I wanted to be sheriff. I go after what I want, Patrick." I looked at Clarissa, who couldn't even meet my gaze. "I think the best thing, Patrick, is for you to pack a bag and find somewhere else to stay for a bit," Bud suggested. "No way," I shot back. "If I leave tonight, your plans change too. I might have walked into this mess, but I'm not just going to walk away. If you two are going to do this, it won't be in my home. I can't stop you, but this is my house, and I won't let it happen here." "Patrick, I don't think you're in a place to make demands," Bud said. "Clarissa and I have made our decision. What I decide will happen." I opened my coat slightly, revealing my holstered firearm. Both Bud and Clarissa took a step back. Whoa, Patrick, let's not make any rash moves, Bud said, his voice cautious. Go get your stuff, Bud, I ordered. Just so you know, I'm not staying here either. I don't want to wake up in a house with my distant wife, but we're both leaving tonight. Understood? All right, Patrick, I get it, but you have to promise me you won't hurt Clarissa when I'm gone, Bud said, his voice strained. The only person I'm angry with more than myself is you, I said, my voice tight with emotion. But no, I won't harm the mother of my kids, but things are going to get tricky if you don't leave my house tonight. Bud nodded, resigned. Okay, I'll grab my things now. As Bud headed upstairs to pack, I followed him. He turned into the guest bedroom, which was in disarray. At least they hadn't disturbed my bed. I rushed to the master bedroom to gather my clothes. Clarissa followed me, her voice trembling as she tried to speak. Patrick, she began, placing a hand on my shoulder. I never wanted to hurt you. Stop! I shouted, pulling away from her. Don't touch me! You have no right to touch me without asking again. Any rights you had in this marriage ended the moment you chose someone else. Clarissa flinched at my words. For years, you've made excuses for why we couldn't connect. Years of distance because of your health. Well, it looks like someone else found the answer you were missing. I couldn't hide my anger. Clarissa stood there, tears in her eyes as I packed my things. I knew we'd have to talk about our future soon, but I was too angry for that right now. Are you proud of what you've done? I asked fiercely. Does it make you happy knowing that you've destroyed our family? Taken a father away from our kids? Before leaving the room, I checked the nightstands. Opening the drawer on Clarissa's side, I was taken aback when I found a tube of medical cream labeled androstenedione, a treatment for low testosterone in women. I stood there, stunned. Clarissa covered her mouth, unable to hide her shock. The look I gave her said more than words could. I stuffed everything into a gym bag and headed downstairs. Bud was waiting by the front door. Patrick, I want your word that nothing will happen to Clarissa. She's really upset. One of us should stay with her. We should think about her first, Bud said in a condescending tone. Clarissa will be okay, Bud, but you won't be if you don't leave my house, I replied sharply. Bud looked at me, disappointment clear on his face. Finally, he turned to Clarissa and said, I'll call you soon, I promise. He tried to come closer to her, but I warned, don't. Bud hesitated, then stepped back, realizing I meant what I said. He started to walk to the door. Clarissa didn't look at either of us. As I turned to leave, I paused in the doorway and stared at her. She was still in her night clothes. Anyone else might have found her attractive, but all I felt was a deep emptiness. Hey, Bud, I called out as he reached the door. I noticed how you used my soon-to-be ex-wife to hide behind when I walked in. Funny how you care about her now. You're really disappointing. Bud didn't respond. He glanced at Clarissa one last time and left. The chilly night air matched my mood as I walked to my car. Bud drove away slowly, making sure I wouldn't follow him, just like I knew he'd keep an eye on me. I drove the 10 miles back to Red River Falls and checked into the Skyline Drive Motel, one of the less desirable places in town. It wasn't fancy, but it was cheap. I dropped my bags on the bed and sank into one of the worn chairs, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. All the frustrations from the past 2 years came rushing back. The guilt about my feelings for Caroline, the endless fights with Clarissa, and the growing distance between us. All our plans for a future together in the countryside felt shattered. That night, sleep came in restless waves, helped by a bottle of cheap wine. I didn't drink much, just enough to dull the pain a bit. The next morning I showered, determined to clean myself up both physically and emotionally. I went to Mass at St. Matthew's, looking for some sense of peace and guidance. My biggest worry was for my sons. Their lives were about to change, and they didn't even know it yet. I wasn't sure what would happen next, or if either of us could keep the land. Bud didn't seem like someone who would farm, but I didn't know his plans. I was sure they didn't include me staying at the sheriff's department. How could he? He planned to leave his wife after the next election and then marry mine. I needed a plan. I needed to think carefully, like a detective, and approach this as if it were an investigation. I knew most of the who, what, and where, but I still wanted to understand the how and why. How had they kept this secret? And what were Bud's plans? Why did Clarissa agree to it? And what did she hope to gain? I remembered what Bud had said about Elmer Suggs. Elmer was a kind man who mostly lived in Red River Falls, though he didn't have a home. I had met him many times over the years when I worked for the Red River Falls Police Department. He was always friendly and never caused trouble. One winter night, when it was 35 degrees below zero, I had to arrest him for being out on the street. I knew that by taking him in, he would be warm, have a hot meal, and a safe place to sleep. Elmer wasn't upset with me for the arrest. He even asked if he could keep the blanket and pillow they provided. That Sunday afternoon, I decided to drive around Red River Falls to check on Elmer. Around 5 o'clock, I finally saw him downtown, walking past the YMCA on Taylor Street. I parked my cruiser and called out, "Hey, Elmer!" He glanced my way but kept walking. I hurried to catch up. "Hold on, Elmer." He stopped when he saw I wasn't going anywhere. "Afternoon, Sheriff," he said quietly. "It's okay, Elmer, you're not in trouble. I just want to chat for a bit," I assured him. "Yeah, all right. Can we go somewhere warm?" he asked in his friendly voice. "Of course, Elmer." There was a little diner called Otis's Diner right across from the YMCA. It had been there for almost 60 years. "Are you hungry, Elmer?" "You know me, Sheriff. I'm always ready to eat," he replied as he led the way. The diner was only about half full, and we found a booth that gave us some privacy. The waitress came over, and I ordered a coffee while Elmer asked for hot cocoa. It was about 3 degrees outside, which was very cold for mid-November. The waitress quickly returned with our drinks and took our food order. "Nothing for me, thanks," I said to the waitress. "Aren't you going to eat anything, Sheriff?" Elmer asked. "No, but that's okay. Elmer, go ahead and order whatever you want." Elmer smiled and ordered a bowl of chicken noodle soup, a pork tenderloin sandwich, French fries, and a large cola to drink. He politely asked if he could get dessert if he was still hungry, and I said sure. The waitress took our order to the kitchen, leaving Elmer and me alone in our booth. After a moment of silence, I decided to start a conversation. I looked at Elmer and asked, "Do you know why I wanted to talk to you, Elmer?" Elmer nodded but avoided eye contact. "Why is that, Elmer?" I pressed. After a pause, he replied, "Because you're in some trouble with Sheriff Roberts." I straightened in my seat, surprised. "Who told you that?" Elmer explained. "Sheriff Roberts picked me up a while ago, took me for a ride. He said you were in trouble for how you treated me when you arrested me. He mentioned other things but didn't explain. He said if I didn't want to get into trouble, I needed to do what he said and say what he wanted." "Go on," I encouraged. "That's about it," Elmer said, his voice tinged with sadness. "He said he'd keep me out of trouble if I listened to him." "Did he offer to help you with anything, Elmer? Like a place to stay? Some money?" I asked. "No," he replied sadly. "Nobody ever helps me. Not when I got kicked out of school, not when I came home from the army. The only person who tried to help was you when you took me in that cold night." Despite everything, I smiled a little. Even though I had arrested him, Elmer saw that I had acted out of kindness. His food arrived, and he ate in silence for the next 15 minutes, savoring every bite. As I watched him, I couldn't help but wonder how someone like him found the strength to keep going every day. He had no family nearby, as far as I knew. I wasn't sure how to help him without making it seem like I had ulterior motives. Whatever I did had to be something lasting. After finishing his meal, Elmer ordered a slice of apple pie with ice cream for dessert and another mug of cocoa. Before we left, I ordered a sandwich and a bag of chips for him to take with him. I could tell that Elmer was grateful for the meal, but he was also uneasy about being asked to say anything negative about me. He was clearly torn between his loyalty to me and his fear of what might happen if he didn't go along with Bud's plan. Even without a home, Elmer still valued his freedom. I offered Elmer a ride to a shelter for the night, but he turned it down. He took the food and walked away. As I drove back to the hotel, I thought about how I could help him. Elmer hadn't had a fair chance in life. Red River Falls had a population of about 30,000, but only 150 to 200 were black. That shouldn't have mattered, but the world isn't perfect, especially not in Bud's and Clarissa's world. Elmer had dropped out of high school and had been in trouble with the law for much of his life. He had never asked for help since returning from what he called the jungle. The jungle. Elmer was in his late 60s, which meant he was the right age to have served in Vietnam. If Elmer was a Vietnam veteran, there might be ways to assist him. I made a note to call the Mason County Veterans Affairs office first thing in the morning. If anyone could help Elmer, it was Rosetta Dirksen at the VA office. That night, I called my friends, pretending I was still at the conference in Minneapolis. Clarissa hadn't said anything to them, which I appreciated. I finished off the rest of the wine from the night before and fell asleep thinking about how to help Elmer. Surprisingly, I slept well, but I woke up with a headache, determined to take charge of my life. Helping Elmer Suggs was the first step. I arrived at the VA office at 8 o'clock on Monday morning and caught Rosetta just as she was starting her day. She had no appointments until 9:30, so I asked for a moment of her time. When I mentioned Elmer Suggs, she quickly let me in. "I've been trying to find Elmer for years," Rosetta said. "I actually have a disability compensation and pension claim for him. He's finally been approved for all his benefits." Hearing those words was wonderful. "What kind of benefits will he get?" I asked. "Elmer is a Purple Heart recipient. He's been rated 100% disabled due to PTSD, Agent Orange exposure, and several shrapnel injuries. The claim is over 10 years old, but he'll receive back benefits for the past year." "Not to sound greedy, but how much will that be?" I asked. "Since he's rated 100% disabled, he should receive about $3,000 a month in disability benefits, with a retroactive payment of around $36,000 for the past year. He also qualifies for complete medical benefits through the VA, with nearly free health care for his service-related issues and lower costs for everything else, along with Medicare benefits. This will provide him with a secure future. As a decorated veteran, Elmer would have a steady income for the rest of his life, enough to afford a place to live and plenty of food." Rosetta mentioned that employees from the VA and the American Legion would help him transition from living on the streets to a safe, comfortable setting. After nearly an hour in Rosetta's office, I felt excited and hopeful. If I could help make all this happen, it would move Elmer away from Bud's influence and into a better situation. Rosetta encouraged me to find Elmer and bring him to her office that day. I searched for him for the next 2 hours, starting at the YMCA where we had met the night before. Eventually, I found him at the Salvation Army's adult daycare center, where he wasn't supposed to be, but they kindly let him come in for free coffee and warmth. I did my best to convince Elmer to join me, and I brought him to the VA office just before noon. Rosetta had arranged her afternoon to help him. We spent the day organizing his medical care, health benefits, and setting up a bank account for his disability payments. We even found him a one-bedroom apartment ready for him to move into by the end of the week. Rosetta arranged for Elmer to have a full medical examination at the VA hospital in Minneapolis, covering various health screenings. He needed a ride, and I was more than happy to take him. We stayed with Elmer throughout the afternoon and evening, and Rosetta made sure he had a place at the shelter until his new apartment was ready. When I got back to my car, I saw I'd missed several calls from Bud Roberts. Curiosity got the better of me, so I called him back. "Are you planning on coming back to work?" Bud asked. "That depends," I replied. "Are you going to stop meddling in my personal life?" "I'm warning you, Patrick. You have a lot more to lose than I do. You might not save your marriage, but you can at least keep your job and support your kids." "Seems like there's a lot of might in your warnings, Bud. Right now, I don't trust you at all. You say I have a lot to lose, but I've decided to act like I have nothing to lose. You've put yourself in a risky situation. You might want to be careful." He laughed. "What do you think you have that I should be worried about, Patrick?" I smiled. "I've got Elmer Suggs." Then I ended the call. I spent the rest of the week helping Elmer get settled. The local Vietnam veterans group heard about him and took him under their wing. When they learned how long he'd been without a home and support, they promised to ensure he would always have both. It was heartening to see them come together for one of their own. On Thursday morning, I picked Elmer up from the shelter. He looked like a new man, clean, with a fresh haircut and wearing new clothes his fellow veterans had bought for him. He was so happy during the ride to Minneapolis. It had been years since he'd left Red River Falls. Although he had only a few teeth left, part of the plan was for him to get new dentures. We spent Thursday afternoon and all of Friday going through his medical exams. I also took some time for myself and visited the Mall of America to buy gifts for Nick and Jake. Elmer stayed overnight in a medical dorm for out-of-town patients. while I got a room at a Best Western near the airport, close to the VA hospital. On Saturday morning, we drove back to Red River Falls. Elmer was quiet, still recovering from the dental procedure where his remaining teeth were removed. Soon, he'd have a brand new set of dentures, and he was excited to finally smile fully again. I dropped him off at his new apartment, which his fellow veterans had prepared while we were away. They had really gone all out, providing him with a nice bed, kitchen table and chairs, a small sofa, a recliner, a dresser, and a fully equipped kitchen. Some items were used, but they were likely better than anything Elmer had seen in a long time. They also stocked his fridge. A large group of veterans and their wives were there to greet us when we arrived. Elmer invited everyone to stay for coffee as his first official guests. I stayed for a while and chatted with Rick Krause, the commander of the local VFW and a fellow Vietnam veteran. I asked Rick to keep an eye on Elmer for a bit while I took care of a few things. Rick didn't ask too many questions. He simply mentioned that a group of Vietnam veterans was planning a 10-day trip to Vietnam in a few weeks, and he was determined to make sure Elmer could join them. As I left Elmer's apartment, I heard him call out, "Hey, Sheriff!" "Yeah, Elmer, need something?" I asked. Elmer struggled to speak, still with gauze in his mouth from the dental work. "Just want to say thanks, Sheriff. No one's ever done what you're doing for me." "No, Elmer," I said, touched. "Thank you. Thank you for serving our country. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize." Elmer nodded, and I left him with his guests. I spent Saturday night at the Skyline Drive Motel. On Sunday morning, I slept in, went to a late mass, and treated myself to brunch before heading back to the farm, pretending I was just returning from the conference. The boys were overjoyed to see me after 2 weeks away, and Clarissa seemed surprised, almost bursting with joy when I walked through the door, exclaiming, "I'm home!" The rest of the afternoon and evening, I spent time with Clarissa and the boys, trying to keep things normal. It seemed she hadn't told them what was happening, which was probably for the best. We enjoyed putting together Lego sets I'd bought them, Star Wars themed, which they both loved. Nick got a huge Lego Millennium Falcon and Jake a Lego Death Star, both with nearly 3,000 pieces. Building the Millennium Falcon took all the way up to bedtime, so we saved the other set for another night. After the boys were asleep, I prepared to leave when Clarissa came over to talk. "How is this going to work, Patrick? We can't keep going on like this forever," she began. "It will be like this until I decide otherwise, Clarissa." "Come on, Patrick. You know Bud won't accept this, and neither will I. You have to think about the boys and yourself." I grabbed my coat to leave, but turned back to her. "Maybe you should reconsider what you think Bud is capable of and focus on what I know I can do." Then I walked out. The next morning, I arrived at work right at 8 a.m. No one paid me much attention as I headed straight to my office. My secretary, Shirley Cunningham, had gathered a large stack of paperwork for me to review while I was away. I could tell right away that this part of the job would be the hardest. Around 10 o'clock, I was called into Bud Roberts' office. Seated across from his desk was Marion Lawson, the Mason County attorney. I'd seen him many times before, but we had never really met. My instincts were telling me something was off. "Patrick, this is our county attorney, Marion Lawson," Bud introduced. Marion stood up, extending his hand. "Pat, it's an honor to meet you. We're all very proud of you. You're quite the hero." I felt a flush of embarrassment at the praise. Marion sat back down, and I noticed Bud watching me with a knowing grin, mirrored by Marion. The compliment didn't feel as genuine anymore. "Marion will be working closely with you from time to time, so I thought it would be good for you two to meet," Bud said. "Oh, I have to step out for a moment. I'll be back soon." I felt uneasy as Marion kept his eyes on me. "You know, Patrick," he began, still with that grin, "I met your wife a while ago. Bud introduced us at a meeting." My expression hardened as he continued, "Your wife is impressive. You've got a great partner. You're a lucky man, Patrick." "Why are you talking about my wife like that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Marion's grin widened. "Let's just say it was nice getting to know her." The way he said it made everything clear. Bud had been discussing my wife with the county attorney. The anger I felt earlier began to boil over, but just then, Bud returned. "Did I miss anything good while I was away?" Bud asked, exchanging another knowing look with Marion. "All right, Patrick, you can head back to your desk." Bud dismissed me like a child. I clenched my fists, feeling a surge of anger stronger than I'd felt since discovering the affair. I turned and left, knowing now wasn't the time for confrontation. I spent the rest of the day stewing in my office, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The affair had been difficult enough when it was just between me and Clarissa, but now, with Marion involved, it felt like everything was spiraling out of control. After work, I hurried home to spend time with the boys. Clarissa seemed to want to leave while I was around, but she could see how happy the boys were to be with me. She mostly stayed in our room watching TV while I hung out with the boys downstairs. After they went to bed, Clarissa approached me again, wanting to talk. "Patrick, we need to talk. Please stop ignoring me." "I'm not ignoring you, Claire. What do you think we need to discuss?" "We need to sort this out. We can't keep confusing the boys like this. They're old enough to understand." "Oh, really?" I replied, sarcasm creeping into my voice. "So do you want to explain to them how their mother is making choices that are tearing our family apart?" "Come on, Patrick. You know what I mean." "I see," I said, my tone cold. "You want them to hear only what you want them to hear, avoiding anything that makes you look bad?" "Calling me names isn't helping. Talking will," she insisted. I sighed, frustration and sadness overwhelming me. "Why? Why are you doing this to me? How could you do this to our family? What made you lose respect for me?" "It's not about disrespect," Clarissa replied after a moment. "I was drawn to Bud's influence. People respect him, some even fear him. He has connections that have helped me. I started receiving more recognition and I couldn't help but feel attracted to that." "So the whole issue with your health was just a way to pull away from me emotionally?" I asked, my voice shaking. "No, Patrick, it's real. The doctor gave me a cream around the same time I met Bud, but it's not what you think." "Great," I said, turning to leave. "What about the boys? You can't just come here every night." I walked up to her, looking her in the eye. "This is still my house. I'll come and go as I please, and I'll be here every night after work until the boys are asleep. That's not up for discussion. Is that clear?" "Bud won't be happy about this, Patrick. We need to create some separation. The boys won't adjust if you don't cooperate. This will continue until I decide it changes. What Bud wants doesn't matter to me. If he doesn't like it, that's his issue. I'll be home after work tomorrow, just like usual." I closed the door behind me a bit too hard, hoping the boys were still asleep. The next morning, I went to work and did my best to avoid Bud. But just after lunch, something happened that would change everything for me. Around 1:30 p.m., Bud came into my office with a serious look. "We have a situation, Patrick," he said as we walked to his office. "The Red River Falls Police Department is dealing with a standoff at 1830 North McKinley Avenue. A 27-year-old man is inside his home with his 5-year-old daughter. He was supposed to be babysitting while the mother was at work. The couple is no longer together, and he's been trying to reconcile with her. Things took a turn, and he's locked himself and the girl inside. We haven't had contact for over 30 minutes, but the police believe they're still inside and likely safe." "Has the Special Operations Group been called in?" I asked. "Yes," Bud replied. "That's why I need you. You were part of the team as a deputy, and now, as chief deputy, you'll take charge." "Bud, I know the basics, but I've never led a tactical operation before." "I know," he said, "but I need you to step up. If you don't, the police and Chief Banks will take over. We need to maintain control of the situation." It dawned on me that this was about control. Bud needed me to lead because the Special Operations Group was a significant part of the budget. The county and local municipalities invested heavily in it, and Bud had to justify its existence. "You have 15 minutes to gear up and get to the scene," Bud ordered. "The armored vehicles are on their way and the team members have been notified." "Okay," I replied. "I'm on it." I started to head out. Bud stepped closer to me, his voice low and threatening. "Just one more thing, Pat. Don't even think about using this situation to make me look bad. If you mess this up, I'll make sure you face serious consequences. You'll be out for good. Do you understand?" I let out a light laugh. "As much as I might want to get back at you, Bud, I'm not risking the life of that little girl. My focus is on getting her out safely and making sure her father is held accountable. I'll smile for the cameras afterward and take pride in the good we did." Bud looked taken aback by my response, but I didn't stick around to see his reaction. I quickly changed into my tactical gear, grabbing my Beretta 9mm, a tactical shotgun, and a 9mm submachine gun. I preferred the submachine gun for close quarters, opting against my AR-15 for this operation. The command center was set up 1 block south and 1 block west of the target house. Officers were stationed around the perimeter, keeping a close watch to ensure no one came or went. Captain Pete Sturgeon from the Red River Falls PD and Chief of Police Clayton Banks were already there. They had evacuated homes within a 9-block radius around the house. The scene was secure with 15 officers from the police department, 8 deputies, and 5 state troopers on site. Alongside Pete and me, 6 other officers were part of the Special Operations team, including 3 deputies and 3 city officers. We had 2 armored vehicles, former Vietnam-era Dodge Power Wagons, now reinforced with steel plating. Our technical gear included powerful speakers for communication or creating distractions. "No luck reaching anyone on the phone?" I asked Pete as I entered the command center. "No, we've tried multiple times, but there's been no response," Pete replied. "We haven't seen any movement inside either, not even a curtain twitch." "All right, let's get started," I said, looking over a map on a laptop. "Actually, Pat," Pete started, "since this is your first special operation as captain, Chief Banks and I thought I should take the lead." "Pete, I don't want to argue about this," I replied firmly. "The sheriff has tasked me with handling it a certain way." The interagency agreement between the county and Red River Falls gave the sheriff overall authority over tactical operations. Pete seemed ready to push back, but I cut him off. "Pete, Chief, I don't want to discuss this further. This is how Bud wants it done. If there's an issue, the chief can take it up with Bud. Right now, let's focus on bringing that girl back safely. What do we know about the house?" Realizing they were outmatched by the sheriff's authority, Pete and Chief Banks exchanged resigned looks. Pete sighed. "We don't know much yet. According to the girl's mother, she left her daughter with the father while she went to work. They're no longer together," he added. "Go on," I prompted. "There were some disagreements between them after she dropped off their daughter this morning. She got worried after more arguments over the phone, where he said some concerning things about himself and the child. When she returned to the house, she found all the doors and windows blocked. She could hear the TV inside, but no one answered when she knocked. It looks like a standoff. After trying to reach the occupants by phone myself and failing, I decided we needed to get eyes inside the house. I requested the city engineer provide any available blueprints or layout drawings. The house was a single-story bungalow built in the late 1940s, with 2 bedrooms, a small front porch leading into the living room, a hallway that connected to the bedrooms and bathroom, and a kitchen on the left side. Given the simple layout, we planned to use fiber optic cables to get a visual inside. We would drill small holes to insert the cables, giving us a view of the key rooms. The video feed wouldn't be perfect, but it should be clear enough to check on the little girl and her father. Since we hadn't heard from them in over 2 hours, time was of the essence. To set up the cables, we needed a distraction. I assigned my deputies, Danny, Chris, and Alex, to handle the drills and place the cables, while another officer, Kirk, was tasked with connecting the cables to the device that would transmit the video to our command center. Everyone had to work quickly. These men had practiced setting up similar equipment in under 2 minutes. The distraction would come from loud noises projected through speakers on our armored vehicles. These speakers could produce sounds at extremely high volumes, enough to draw attention away from our work. I assigned Michael and Dick to drive the armored vehicles up to the front porch, where they would create a commotion to lure the target, Colton Rigby, a 25-year-old man, to the front of the house. His ex-partner, Cheyenne Teasdale, was 23, and their daughter, Amber, was 5. Pete Sturgeon had concerns about my plan. He worried that creating a scene might push Rigby to react violently. I believed that my approach would give us an advantage, making Rigby less alert and more likely to underestimate our next move. Some team members sided with Pete, and I could feel the tension. I wished Bud was there to help manage Chief Banks if needed, but I knew I had to step up and keep the team united. To maintain the team's confidence and address Pete's concerns, I assigned Pete to the command post so he could monitor the computer systems and notify me when the cameras were live. The armored vehicle was prepped, the sound system was ready, and the placement team was in position. Everything was set for the operation. I gave the signal. The powerful vehicles roared to life, rushing down the street from both ends. The placement team quickly moved into position behind a nearby house. The armored vehicles lit up with flashing lights, and the sound systems blasted a loud, high-pitched noise designed to disorient anyone inside. Almost immediately, I noticed the curtain in the front window twitch. Someone was peeking out. The plan was working. The team completed the cable setup in just 1 minute and 45 seconds, and I ordered the vehicles to pull back. Silence returned to the neighborhood. I hurried back to the command post, where Pete confirmed that we had video feed from all 6 cameras. The cables were perfectly placed. As I settled in, my phone rang. It was the same number I had tried earlier. I picked it up. "Who is this?" Colton shouted from the other end. "This is Chief Deputy Quinn from the Mason County Sheriff's Department. Who am I speaking with?" "Don't act like you don't know who this is. What the hell is going on out there? You're scaring my daughter." "Please calm down, Mr. Rigby. We were trying to check if anyone was home." "Well, I'm here. What do you want? Just leave us alone." "We called multiple times, Mr. Rigby. We needed to ensure your daughter Amber is safe." "She's fine. Just go away." "Why are you barricading yourselves inside, Mr. Rigby?" I asked, trying to understand his mindset. "I just don't want to be disturbed. I want you to leave us alone." "I'm afraid we can't do that, Mr. Rigby. Miss Teasdale mentioned you might be upset. We want to make sure everyone is safe." "You don't know anything about what I want. I just want to talk to her and sort things out. Do you understand? I can't send Cheyenne to speak with you if I believe she's in danger, Mr. Rigby. Bring her here right now, or things will get worse. I need to see her." His voice grew more agitated. "I'll do my best, Mr. Rigby, but I need your assurance that you won't harm yourself or Amber." "I'm not promising you anything. Just do what I say." The call abruptly ended. I stepped away from the command post and headed to our staging area a block away where Cheyenne Teasdale was being attended to by the Red River Falls Fire Department. "Miss Teasdale?" I asked. "Yes," she responded, her eyes red and puffy. "I'm Chief Deputy Quinn. I'm in charge of the situation. Can I ask you a few questions?" "I'll do anything to help get my daughter back," she replied. Cheyenne answered my questions with detailed honesty. She and Colton had dated in high school, and she had gotten pregnant at 17. They both had difficult childhoods. While Cheyenne tried to make things work, Colton struggled and became increasingly controlling. Eventually, they broke up, especially after Colton started having issues with drugs, a growing problem in Red River Falls. Cheyenne had been planning to ask the court to limit his time with their daughter. When I asked why she had taken her daughter to his house if she planned to make things stricter, she explained that he was out of work and her usual daycare provider was sick. Amber only went to preschool 3 days a week, and Cheyenne had no other options that day. She grew worried when she heard that Colton had learned about her plans to limit his time with Amber. Cheyenne also revealed that Colton likely had guns in the house. Some were confiscated during his recent arrest, but she believed he had others hidden. "Please, mister." "Quinn," she begged, "help me get my daughter back. I'm begging you. I promise you, Miss Teasdale, I'll do everything I can to bring your daughter back safely." As I returned to the command post, I noticed Pete Sturgeon and Chief Banks deep in conversation. Pete motioned for me to step aside. "Pat, can we talk?" "What's up, Pete?" "I think I should take charge of this situation." "Why do you think that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Pete hesitated. "I believe you're too new to lead this team in such a sensitive case. We need a calm, experienced approach." I glanced around, noticing the rest of the team watching us. "Listen, Pete," I replied. "The first part of the plan has gone well. We have the house set up, we've made contact, and we know the little girl is okay. I've managed that so far. Now I need your support and focus. If we need to make a move, I need everyone on the same page." "My focus is here, Pat," Pete insisted. "No, it isn't, Pete. Not while you're thinking about taking charge. Let's get back to the team and go over the plan to bring that little girl home." I didn't wait for Pete's response and headed straight back to the command post. As I arrived, the phone was already ringing. "Captain Quinn," I answered. "Where is that girl?" Rigby's voice was tense. Mr. Rigby, it's only been 15 minutes since we last spoke. Miss Teasdale is understandably upset right now. His early call indicated his growing anxiety. I want her at my door in the next 5 minutes, or else. Or else what, Mr. Rigby? His tone suddenly dropped to a chilling calmness. You don't want to find out, he threatened. I need to go back and speak with her again, Mr. Rigby, to persuade her to see you. I'm asking for the full 30 minutes. There was silence on the line for nearly 30 seconds. Fine. You have another 15 minutes, not a second more. If Cheyenne isn't here soon, we might have a serious problem. His words sent a wave of fear through me. I turned to Pete Sturgeon. Gather the team. We're moving in. Wait a minute, Pat. What did he mean by that? Pete asked, looking concerned. He said if she's not there in 15 minutes, he's going to hurt the child, maybe even himself, I explained. Did he really say that? Chief Banks questioned, surprised. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Yes, he did. He made a threat, and we need to act now. The rest of the team is getting ready. Pat, can I talk to you for a minute? Pete interjected. You've got 30 seconds, then I'm briefing everyone on the plan. I really think I should lead this operation, Pat. And I think you need to focus on your role, Pete. Pat, I'm trying to keep this professional, he started, but I cut him off. That's enough. You're off the team. If I can't rely on you, stay here and monitor the radio. I called over Brian Keller, one of our new deputies. Brian, I need you to manage the video feed from the target house. Keep track of Rigby and the little girl at all times. We have 6 cameras set up to cover all the rooms. Got it, boss, Brian replied, quickly putting on his headset and taking his position at the computer. I felt reassured knowing I had someone reliable handling the information I needed. Pete looked frustrated and glanced at Chief Banks for support, but got none. They couldn't fully understand the tension between me and Bud, and I had to use that to my advantage. While they might be irritated with me, neither wanted to face Bud's anger. I quickly outlined the plan. 2 armored vehicles would approach the target house from either end of the street on my signal, lights flashing. We'd likely breach the back door, minimizing the risk to everyone inside, especially the little girl. The entry team, consisting of me and 4 other members, would then rush in, secure Rigby, and ensure Amber was safe. We lined up in a stack, ready to move. Video, this is Breach. What do you see, Brian? I asked. Breach, this is Video. The suspect is still in the front room. He's holding something. Hold on. A few seconds later, Brian responded. Breach, be careful. The suspect has what looks like a shotgun. I realized we had taken too long and Rigby had armed himself. Got it. All team members, this is Quinn. Get ready to enter on my signal. I counted down from 10, giving us a moment to prepare. Video, where is the little girl? Entry, the little girl is still in the closet in the first bedroom to your left when you come in from the back, Brian responded confidently. Let's go in. APC-1 and APC-2, move out, I commanded. The armored vehicles advanced, sirens blaring as the team set the charges on the back door. Once I felt the vehicles were in position, I shouted, "Blow the doors!" The controlled explosion opened the back door and we moved in quickly. Flashbangs went off, disorienting Rigby as we entered. Through the smoke, I spotted him on the floor, reaching for something. "Police! Get down on the floor!" I shouted. In that moment, I decided to use my taser instead of lethal force. I aimed and fired, hitting Rigby in the shoulder and neck. He screamed and fell face down. I quickly moved in, pressing my knee on his back to secure him. State Trooper Ken Flatness followed, handcuffing Rigby. From behind us, I heard the other team members call out, "Clear!" signaling that the rest of the house was secure. Danny Larson, the last to enter, found Amber hiding in a closet. She was terrified, covering her ears and trembling. Our intimidating black uniforms and gear only made her more frightened. Ken and I checked Rigby for any hidden weapons. He was still dazed from the taser. Another officer retrieved the shotgun, confirming it was loaded. The operation had been a success. Amber was safe, and Rigby was in custody. But as I looked at the scene around me, I knew this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. I respected that weapon, especially after our earlier encounter. I spoke into my headset. All personnel, this is Chief Deputy Quinn. The building is secure and the suspect is in our control. As the noise from the armored vehicles faded, we quickly searched the house, finding no more surprises. We helped Rigby to his feet. The taser had left him disoriented. I informed Brian Keller that we were heading to the command post and requested paramedics for Rigby. Before leaving, I comforted little Amber, who had stopped crying but still looked scared. I gently introduced myself and offered to take her to her mother. She nodded and clung to me as we moved a piece of furniture, blocking the door. Carrying Amber to her mother was a proud moment for me. Despite some complaints from Pete Sturgeon, I was eager for the news cameras to capture the touching reunion. Brian Keller greeted me with praise, and Pete Sturgeon and Chief Banks gave me envious looks as we moved to the staging area. The crowd cheered loudly as Amber asked why. I told her they were cheering because she was the bravest girl ever. Her face lit up with happiness as we reached the police barricade, where Cheyenne Teasdale rushed to her daughter, hugging her tightly with tears of joy. I helped them to the staging area where paramedics awaited. Cheyenne thanked me repeatedly as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. I promised a press conference later and moved on. At the edge of the police line, I spotted Shannon Sullivan in blue medical scrubs. She smiled widely, saying she'd worked an extra shift to support me. I appreciated her belief in me, though I pushed away thoughts of wishing my wife saw me like Shannon did. We chatted briefly before the cameras focused on us, and I had to excuse myself to handle paperwork. Shannon told me I'd always be her hero, and as we shook hands, I felt a pang of regret for having to leave. Back at the command post, Colton Rigby, now in custody, tried to downplay his situation. I calmly reminded him of the serious federal charges he faced. His confident facade faded as Brian Keller drove him away, a tear rolling down his face. The night felt like a mix of adrenaline and satisfaction from the rescue and my conversation with Shannon. I stayed at the scene until nearly midnight, then headed to my simple motel, falling into a deep, peaceful sleep without needing a drink. My dreams were only of Shannon, not the day's troubles. The next morning, I arrived at the office around 10:30. Bud was waiting outside his office. "I was starting to think you weren't showing up," he said. I replied, "I thought I earned a bit of extra time off from yesterday." Bud warned, "Don't get too comfortable. You still need to work a full day." I shot back, "Just like the full day you had yesterday during the standoff." Bud's tone shifted. "Chief Banks and Pete Sturgeon definitely missed you. This could still go badly for you. You're still a small player here." I glanced around, noticing no one else seemed to hear. "Really? What can you do?" I challenged. Bud smiled. "You need to accept that whatever I plan will happen." I smirked. "I've saved 2 lives in 6 months. That's pretty impressive, right?" Bud nodded. "Enjoy this small win, but remember, I'm still in charge." He went into his office and I gritted my teeth, wanting to confront him but knowing I had more pressing matters. At the press conference, Bud let me handle the Q&A after a reporter requested it. I enjoyed the attention and the opportunity to overshadow Bud, who looked frustrated. By 3 p.m., the conference ended, and I was pleased with the positive reception. Later, my secretary, Karen, buzzed me about a visitor. It was Shannon. We greeted each other warmly, and she invited me to dinner this week as a thank you from her and Bridget. I hesitated, mentioning troubles at home. Shannon expressed her sympathy and assured me the invitation stood regardless. I decided to accept. "Dinner sounds wonderful. I'd love to be your guest," I said. Shannon's face lit up. "I make a fantastic rack of lamb. Bridget will be thrilled." I suggested bringing flowers or a small gift. Shannon joked, "If you do that, she might want you to stay forever." I laughed. "If you cook as well as you say, maybe I won't want to leave." We agreed on 6 o'clock Friday night. I walked Shannon to the door of my office. Instead of a handshake, she hugged me, and I felt a special connection that left me puzzled. As we parted, she reminded me, "See you Friday night at 6 o'clock sharp. Don't be late or Bridget will give you a hard time." I watched her leave, feeling the gaze of a few deputies. Their reactions were clear. They were curious. At home, I was excited to see my boys. They eagerly listened to my story about the rescue. Clarissa made a nice dinner, but I stayed up playing video games with the boys, which didn't please her. Clarissa didn't like video games, especially Call of Duty, but we played for 3 hours. When the boys were asleep, Clarissa approached me. "Patrick, I need you to stay with the boys this weekend. I'm leaving Friday afternoon for the city," she said. I refused. "I can't. I have a commitment that night," Clarissa argued. "I really need some time for myself. Why not be honest about your plans with Bud?" I replied, "I have plans I can't change, and you need to wait for your getaway." I left before she could argue further. The next morning, Bud was clearly upset I wouldn't cover for him. I considered his whereabouts during the crisis and wanted to investigate. The week dragged as I looked forward to dinner with Shannon and Bridget on Friday. I left work early to finish tasks and avoid any delays. I turned off my phone to focus on my evening. I arrived at Shannon's house at 5:58 p.m. with a bouquet of flowers, a bottle of wine, and a new toboggan for Bridget. Shannon and Bridget were delighted. The cozy bungalow was beautifully decorated for Christmas, and Shannon had prepared a delicious dinner: rack of lamb, fruit salad, asparagus, and creamy mashed potatoes. For dessert, there were brownies with vanilla ice cream and hot fudge. We enjoyed a candlelit meal and a lively game of Monopoly. Bridget was a top player, and when she went to bed, she asked me to read her a story. Shannon stood by the door while we read *The Velveteen Rabbit*. Bridget fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, making the evening feel perfect. I finished reading and gently brushed Bridget's hair as she slept. When I walked into the living room, Shannon, now in jeans and a Minnesota State Mankato sweatshirt, offered me a glass of wine. We settled on the sofa, surrounded by the warm glow of candles. Shannon looked great in her casual outfit, and I found it hard to keep my emotions in check. "Thank you for coming tonight, Patrick. You made Bridget's day," Shannon said, taking my hand. We clinked our glasses together, and I felt a surge of happiness. I asked about her life and her house, which she explained was a work in progress after she had Bridget at a young age. She had worked hard to get her nursing degrees while living with her parents and later dealing with an absent father. "I can only imagine how tough that was," I said. Shannon shared how her father had been disappointed but eventually came around, and how she had to get a restraining order against Billy, Bridget's father, who had been largely absent. "Remind me never to cross your dad," I joked. Shannon smiled and reassured me, saying her dad was looking forward to meeting me. She quickly corrected herself, noting it sounded like we were dating. I laughed it off and expressed my interest in meeting her family someday. I told Shannon about my family, mentioning my estranged father and my late mother, who had struggled with cancer. Shannon offered her condolences, and I explained why I moved to Red River Falls, my sister's move and my own career shift. As the conversation deepened, I revealed my frustrations about Bud and Clarissa, how their actions seemed to have been orchestrated to complicate my situation. I shared my worries about losing my job and facing accusations, and how Bud's plans with Clarissa had left me feeling betrayed. Shannon listened intently, and when I finished, I saw tears in her eyes. She took my wine glass, placed it on the table, and hugged me tightly. "Oh, Patrick," she whispered, "how could anyone treat you this way? You're such a good person." Her embrace was a lifeline, reminding me that I still mattered. "Thank you," I said, feeling a deep sense of relief. I whispered to Shannon as we held each other, "Thank you for helping me find a part of myself I thought was lost." She slowly pulled away, wiping her tears, and gazed at me with a mix of curiosity and affection. Then she placed her hands on my face and kissed me gently. Surprised, I kissed her back with equal warmth. Shannon then stood up with determination, removing her sweatshirt. "Tonight I want to do something special for you," she said softly. She continued to undress, revealing a calm confidence. I reached out, taking her hand, and we embraced, finding comfort in each other's presence. As we grew closer, Shannon helped me remove my shoes, socks, and then my clothes, noticing my scars with a soft expression. "Why, Sheriff Quinn?" she teased lightly. "Are you happy to see me?" Her playful tone eased the tension, and I smiled. We moved to the sofa, where I knelt in front of her, resting my hands on her knees. We enjoyed a quiet moment, savoring our connection. Shannon's gentle touch and the way she looked at me made it clear that our bond was deeper than physical. We held each other, feeling an almost magical sense of togetherness. Shannon encouraged me to sit where she had been. We embraced, letting the moment unfold naturally. As we held each other, she whispered, "Patrick, you make me feel so whole. I just want to give everything I have to you." The emotions between us grew, and we stayed close, enjoying the warmth of our connection. Afterward, Shannon giggled, "My goodness, Sean Patrick Quinn, how much happiness can you hold inside?" I chuckled, "It's been so long since I felt like this." Reality hit me suddenly, and I realized I hadn't taken precautions. Shannon reassured me, "Relax, cowboy. I just finished my cycle yesterday, so there's no worry, Shannon reassured me with a giggle. Trust me, we're fine. I know what I'm talking about. I leaned back, impressed. You're amazing, I said. Remember when I said I probably wouldn't want to leave tonight? She smiled. I do. I wish you didn't have to go, she admitted, moving closer. No matter what happens after tonight, you'll be hard to forget. I asked, what do you think tonight was about? Maybe it was something wonderful that can't be defined, she replied. I don't want this to be a fleeting moment. We deserve more, I said. Yes, we do, she agreed, snuggling closer. And if you're single in the future, I'll definitely give you a push. I wish I could promise more, I said, but I promise you'll be the first I call if that day comes. Shannon smiled. Here's to promises, I proposed, raising my glass. No, let's toast to possibilities, she suggested. We chatted for a while, enjoying our growing closeness. As I got ready to leave, we exchanged phone numbers and email addresses, and Shannon reminded me to take Bridget sledding with her new toboggan. We shared a warm hug at the door, and I walked to my car, feeling that the short walk seemed longer. Back at my motel, I lay on the bed, reflecting on the night, and realized I was falling in love with Shannon. The next morning, I felt great and had to pinch myself to believe it was real. I showered, replaying our moments together, and then drove to the farm to spend the day with my boys. Clarissa was clearly annoyed by my good mood. You didn't visit them last night? She snapped. I simply replied, no. She warned that Bud would be upset, but I chose not to argue. Instead, I focused on having fun with the boys, pizza, video games, and a 3D movie. We enjoyed every bit of it. When I returned, Clarissa was curled up with a book and wine, and I decided to leave after tucking the boys in to avoid more arguments. On Sunday, I had breakfast at Denny's and attended late-morning Mass at St. Matthew's, missing the familiar faces. After Mass, I was surprised to see Bridget running toward me. I scooped her up, and Shannon and her parents, Suzanne and Jack, came up behind her. Shannon introduced her parents, and we had a pleasant exchange. Patrick, are you going to take me sledding soon? Bridget asked eagerly. Definitely, I promised. We'll be first on the hill before the snowstorm hits. I can't express how grateful we are for everything you've done for our family, Jack said. Oh, it's nothing. Just doing my job, I replied. Even a janitor mopping a floor is just doing his job, he smiled. Jack noted. He's not going to work every day worrying about getting hurt. True, I agreed. I'm just happy I could help and that everything turned out well. Suzanne asked, how are you feeling after your injuries? Almost fully recovered, I said, glancing at Shannon, who blushed slightly. And you, Shannon? I'm doing well, she replied, smiling. Life feels good these days. I had to stifle a laugh at her light-hearted joke about our last encounter, trying to maintain a serious demeanor while her parents remained unaware. Her mother then asked, any plans for the rest of the day? I'm meeting friends to watch the Vikings game, I said. Sounds fun, Jack replied. You're welcome to join us for the game and my wife's roast beef if you change your mind. I appreciate it, but I just had a late breakfast, I explained. I'm planning on enjoying some snacks at the bar, plus I get really into the game. Jack laughed and said, the offer stands if you reconsider. We chatted a bit longer before stepping out into the chilly December air. Shannon glanced back, smiled, and waved as her family headed to their car. I had lied about meeting friends to avoid any awkwardness with her parents, as I would have enjoyed another home-cooked meal. Instead, I spent the afternoon at a local sports bar, the End Zone, watching the Vikings game. Though the drinks were nice, my team lost a close match to the Packers. The next morning, I showed up at work later than planned, just after 9 o'clock. I had spent the night thinking about my issues with Bud and Clarissa and realized I needed a clue. My son Nick had mentioned his mom spent a lot of time on the computer, which led me to wonder if there were any clues or future plans I might find. I spotted my friend Danny Larson and asked him if he knew anything about computers. I'm not an expert, but I can help if I can, he said. He suggested I talk to Chris Hayes or his partner, Tanya Fulbright. She runs a computer business and a record shop downtown, Danny explained. It's an odd combination, but she's brilliant with computers. After our coffee, I planned to catch Chris Hayes during the afternoon shift change and ask him to have breakfast with me the next morning. Later, I received a call from Bud's office. I walked in, and Bud, facing away, gestured for me to sit. He remained focused on his laptop for nearly 10 minutes before I broke the silence. "I'm sorry, but did you need something?" I asked. "I have 3 warrants to finish up this afternoon." Bud continued typing and asked, "Why did you upset Clarissa this past weekend?" "I wasn't trying to," I said. "I had plans, and if she felt bad about it, that's on me." Bud kept typing, his attention fixed on the screen. "Do you know why we're having this meeting?" Bud asked, his tone suggesting he wanted me to leave. I decided to stay seated for another 20 minutes until his phone rang. Margolin, I guessed. Without a word, Bud waved me away. Feeling my time was wasted, I had to cut into my lunch break to finish the warrants for the deputies. By 2:45 that afternoon, Deputy Chris Hayes returned to his desk. "Got a minute?" I asked. Surprised, he agreed. "I'd like to meet tomorrow morning," I said. "How about breakfast at the donut hole?" He agreed with a hint of sarcasm. "Okay, Cap. I'll be there." The next morning, I arrived at the donut hole at 7:55. Chris was already seated, sipping coffee. I ordered coffee and asked if he was hungry. Chris grunted, "I guess a man's got to eat," and ordered a large breakfast. I opted for a Belgian waffle and bacon. Once the waitress left, Chris asked, "So, what's this about?" "It's personal," I replied. "I need help with some computer stuff, and I heard your partner might assist." Chris's tone turned defensive. "You want me to ask my girlfriend for a favor?" "Yes," I said. "It's not about the department." Chris crossed his arms. "You're asking for a personal favor on work time? You think you can just get everything you want?" I was taken aback. "I've worked hard for my position. I've got degrees and years of service." Chris retorted, "And yet you skipped all the tough shifts and went straight to management. You don't understand how the rest of us feel." I was stunned. "I'm just trying to get help," I said. Chris's frustration was palpable. I decided to take a break, heading to the restroom to collect my thoughts. Staring in the mirror, I realized Chris's frustration was a reflection of a broader discontent within the department. He was right. My career had advanced rapidly, and I needed to address these underlying tensions. I got my job because of personal connections, not because I earned it, I admitted as I sat back down across from Chris Hayes. I needed to be honest to regain my self-respect and get his help. "You're right about everything," I confessed. Chris looked surprised. "No trick, Chris, I'm serious. Bud Roberts has been involved with my wife for 2 years. He got me this job and promoted me to make my downfall more believable. I'm in a tough spot now with more responsibilities and no union safety net." Chris took a deep breath. "What do you think Bud has planned?" "I'm not sure," I replied. "It's likely serious trouble once everything comes out." Chris was shocked. "How did you find out?" "I came home early from a conference and caught them at my place. Bud had made excuses, and when I tried to call him, his wife didn't know he was coming back. I didn't tell her. I was too shocked." Chris softened. "I'm sorry for earlier. I didn't know. I just wanted you to see how others view your position." "I get it," I said. "I was tricking myself into thinking my success was purely my own." Our food arrived, and Chris said, "I'll talk to Tanya about helping you, but first, I need 2 things. Promise not to make any moves on my girlfriend and support me if I ever need it. No questions asked." "If you can do that, I'll make sure you get support from the deputies." "I promise," I said. "I always repay those who help me." "Good. After breakfast, we'll go for a ride," Chris said. We finished eating, and Chris had me open my trunk. He retrieved a small GPS locator from beneath the spare tire. "Bud tracks his deputies," he explained. "He must have been busy that night." Chris drove us to a rundown part of downtown. We arrived at a large, old building that used to be a drugstore. I followed him inside, the brass bell above the door jingling. The first thing I noticed were the security cameras and heavy bars on the windows. The shop was divided, one side filled with computers, some for sale and others being repaired, behind locked glass cases, and the other side cluttered with vinyl records, CDs, DVDs, and even cassette tapes. Posters of bands and movies covered the walls, and a strange smell lingered in the air. Chris caught my sniff and said, "Yeah, it's marijuana. Remember your promise." I raised my hands in acknowledgement. "Is Tanya here?" Chris asked a young woman in black who pointed us to the back. We passed through black curtains into a workshop where a tall woman with bright black hair and numerous tattoos greeted us. "Hey, Chris, what's up?" she asked as they shared a hug. Chris introduced me. "This is Tanya. Tanya, meet Chief Deputy Captain Pat Quinn. Nice to meet you, Tanya said, shaking my hand. Let's head to my office. In a spacious garage, Tanya opened a refrigerator, pulled out a rolled cigarette, and lit it, letting in some fresh air. So, what's going on? She asked. I told her everything. Bud's involvement with my wife, how my job and promotion were part of the deal, and my need for solid evidence. Tanya listened, then said, That's tough. I can help. Do they mostly communicate via phone, texts, or email? Not sure. Bud uses his computer a lot at work, and my wife's on hers when I'm away. Bud also texts from his personal phone. We should start with a keylogger on your computer, Tanya suggested. It tracks keystrokes and can help find passwords. I can also install a hidden app on her Android phone to forward her messages to your email. What about emails? I asked. You can forward those to yourself and delete them from the sent box to keep it discreet. Tanya continued. If Bud's smart, he'll use his work device for emails and personal phone for texts. But if he's contacting your wife from work, it could cause issues. Are you open to bending some rules if it avoids trouble? Tanya asked. Depends on what you mean, I replied, intrigued. What if I could make every email or text Bud sent to your wife appear to come from his work account or phone? Tanya proposed. Seriously? How? I asked. Just give me the emails or texts he sent you. I can modify them to look like they came from his work network, Tanya explained. It'll be seamless. I was impressed. You can really do that? Tanya assured me she could make Bud's texts and emails appear genuinely from him, which sounded perfect. Let's do it, I said. And she smiled, stamping out the cigarette and chatting with Chris. I watched them interact with curiosity until Tanya asked for a moment alone with Chris. Sure, I said, heading to the front of the store. I browsed through the vinyl records, marveling at Tanya's impressive collection. A friendly goth employee asked if I was a cop. Deputy Sheriff, I replied. She seemed relieved and went back to organizing. Chris soon returned, looking flustered. Was it good for you too? I joked. Chris chuckled and handed me a USB drive and another with a phone adapter. These have software to help you gather the information you need. Tanya wrote instructions for you. Thanks, Chris. I won't forget this, I said. We left and I saw Tanya wave goodbye as I drove off. Back at the office, I got a text from Shannon wishing me a good day and expressing her care. It lifted my spirits, making everything seem brighter. Karen informed me Bud was out for lunch and I suspected where he was. After finishing work, I drove home. My kids were excited to see me and we played in the snow before dinner. Clarissa made meatballs and after dinner, I offered to help with the dishes. Clarissa went for a bath with her iPod, leaving her phone behind. I seized the chance to plug in the external drive, and soon Clarissa's phone provided me with her username and password. I set up the program on our family computer to track her keystrokes and then returned to playing video games with the boys. With Christmas approaching, I realized I needed gifts for the boys. Clarissa was still in the bathroom when I decided to avoid a disagreement and took my old work uniforms to the motel. The next day, I took time off work and bought new uniforms with U.S. Army insignia from a surplus store. I pinned silver bars to my shirt's collar and attached the captain's insignia to my shoulders, finishing with my old equipment belt. For the first time in a while, I felt like a real law enforcement officer again. At work, Chris Hayes noticed my uniform and gave a nod of approval. When my desk phone rang, Karen informed me Bud wanted to see me. Bud seemed annoyed by my uniform. I didn't approve this, he said. I didn't recall approving yours either, I replied. Bud smirked. I see what you're doing, trying to win back respect. This is who I am, I said, unbothered. If you feel guilty about it, that's on you. Bud's eyes narrowed. Interesting. I didn't think you were capable of feeling guilt. I turned away, determined not to let him ruin my day. A text from Shannon popped up. Happy Tuesday. Just wanted to say I'm thinking of you. Be safe. Her words lifted my spirits. Bud glared at me from his office door. I smiled and raised my phone, showing him the message. Bud stormed into my office, demanding to know why I was in a good mood. I've decided not to let you and Clarissa bother me anymore. I have support that helps me handle this, I said. You think you're clever, Bud said with a chuckle. Clarissa and I are together now. Deal with it. Maybe I've accepted that, I replied, but I'm not okay with how you're treating her. Bud threatened to undermine my setup, but I countered that I was already making changes. It's like peeling an onion. I'll reach the truth eventually. Bud warned that he could impact my kids, making them ashamed and unhappy. "You need to think about how far you're pushing me," I said. "You never know how someone backed into a corner will react." Bud left, and I noticed the curious glances of my colleagues. At home, Clarissa seemed surprised by my uniform. She said she needed to go shopping, and I took the opportunity to set up a keylogger on our home computer. I accessed her email and social media accounts, discovering over 600 emails and 11,000 text messages between her and Bud. The texts, while initially harmless, grew more personal, suggesting possible meetings. Despite some flirty messages, I found no concrete proof. The most revealing emails were between Clarissa and Bud's personal account, not his work email. Tanya assured me she had a solution for that, so I saved and forwarded those emails to myself. Most communication was via text, and I spent the night sifting through them, focusing on the last 6 months. It seemed Bud was plotting against me. The next morning, I called in sick and stayed at the hotel to review more texts and emails. One text caught my eye. Bud claimed to have all the evidence needed and mentioned a winner in Jeff who worked at the Mason County Jail. I decided to investigate Jeff McCauley further. I called Tanya for help with a background check. She was quick to assist, revealing Jeff's basic information and noting only minor traffic tickets. I suspected Bud had leverage over Jeff, possibly financial troubles. I asked Tanya to dig into Jeff's finances. Tanya reported that Jeff had maxed out credit cards, $60,000 on one and $35,000 on the other, and a $55,000 mortgage. She discovered Jeff's gambling problem, as both cards had cash advances from Canterbury Park. This debt could easily be used to manipulate him. Bud must be using Jeff's gambling problem to control him, ensuring his compliance in the property and evidence room. I thanked Tanya, promising to make it up to her and Chris. Tanya playfully hinted at future favors, but assured me that Chris was open and understanding. I suggested to Tanya that spending time together might benefit us all, and she agreed, laughing before hanging up. Feeling better, I visited Jeff McCauley at the Property and Evidence Office the next morning. Bud Roberts was out for the day, so I took the opportunity to check on Jeff. Jeff, surprised to see me, mentioned he was just finishing the weekly inventory. I told him I wanted to review the logs and do an inventory check myself. Jeff looked nervous and tried to leave early, but I insisted on completing the review first. I noticed his unease and suspected he was hiding something. When I confronted Jeff about his financial troubles and Bud's possible leverage, he broke down. He admitted his financial issues and Bud's manipulation. I assured Jeff I'd help him but needed the full truth about Bud's demands. Jeff, relieved, agreed to cooperate. I gathered Danny Larson, Chris Hayes, Angel Ryerson, and Lieutenant Benito Ben Villanueva for support. Despite uncertainties about Ben's feelings towards my promotion, I trusted his professionalism. I planned to meet with Jeff and the team at 4 p.m. after the shift ended. I kept a close watch on Jeff throughout the day and drove us to the Skyline Drive Motel to avoid GPS tracking. I instructed everyone to remove the batteries from their phones to prevent tracking, and despite some grumbling, they complied. Jeff and I drove to a storage unit at Red River Rentals, where Jeff unlocked Unit 189. Inside, I found over 80 bags and boxes of evidence, all from our evidence lockers, and moved to this shed. Shocked, I demanded answers from Jeff, who admitted that Bud Roberts had manipulated him into tampering with evidence. Ben, Angel, Danny, and Chris joined me in examining the contents. Jeff revealed that Bud had used my electronic signature to authorize the removal of evidence, and his personal vehicle had been used for transport. I was overwhelmed by the scale of the tampering and the potential consequences for the cases involved. Ben and I stepped outside to discuss our next move. I briefed the team on the situation and explained that Tanya could help restore the records. A quick call to Tanya confirmed she could meet us at the sheriff's office to rectify the situation. We decided to return the evidence that night, with Tanya handling the electronic records. I assured Jeff that while I would help with his gambling issue and ensure he kept his job, he would no longer manage the evidence room. Jeff would also lose access to the armory and evidence areas. Jeff reluctantly agreed, recognizing the gravity of his situation. Tanya arrived at the sheriff's office and began working on the records immediately. By the time we finished loading the evidence and returned, it was well past 8 p.m. Jeff carefully put everything back in its place in the evidence room. Tanya worked late into the night, reversing all electronic transactions and removing evidence of Bud Roberts' frame-up from the email system. By midnight, there was no trace of Bud's scheme. I thanked Chris and Tanya for their help, promising not to forget their support. Ben, Angel, and Danny, though uneasy about the secrecy, shook hands before leaving. I assured them I would take full responsibility if the situation came to light and warned Jeff not to disclose anything. I then asked Chris and Tanya for one more favor, a backup plan in case Bud tried to cause more trouble. They agreed to help me investigate potential threats and monitor personal computers if needed. As I headed to my truck, a text from Bridget brightened my mood. She and her family were excited to join us at the sledding hill with my boys. I eagerly made plans for the day. Clarissa's concerns about my decisions were overshadowed by my anticipation for the outing. At the hill, Shannon and Bridget greeted us warmly. Bridget was thrilled to meet my boys, who quickly welcomed her into their play. Shannon and I enjoyed hot cocoa while discussing my recent troubles. I confided in her about Jeff's predicament, Bud's manipulations, and the danger of exposing the evidence. Shannon expressed her disbelief and concern, suggesting I take the evidence to the state police. I explained that doing so could jeopardize ongoing investigations and compromise the entire department. Evidence from our office linked back to cases from both the Red River Falls Police Department and the Mason County Sheriff's Department. The state attorney general might review everything, risking retrials for over 2,000 cases from the past decade. The worst part? Bud's scheme would tarnish how my sons saw me forever. They'd grow up thinking I was a criminal no matter what I said or did. Shannon comforted me, promising not to let that happen. As we talked, I noticed Nick, Jake, and Bridget waiting on the hill for another run. Shannon mentioned being cold and hugged me for warmth, which made the boys smile. Shannon's parents arrived, and though Jack seemed distant, Suzanne was warm and friendly. After a fun morning of sledding, Bridget suggested McDonald's for lunch, and everyone agreed. Jack and Suzanne joined us, surprising me since Jack usually avoided fast food. I noticed Jack's cautious interest, possibly to ensure I was genuine. We spent the afternoon at the movies, with the boys picking their favorites. When we returned home, I noticed fresh tire tracks and the lingering scent of Bud's cologne. Clarissa greeted me cheerfully, but I could sense trouble. I hugged the boys, promising to see them at church the next day, and left. At the hotel, I reviewed messages between Clarissa and Bud, discovering disturbing updates. Bud had shown up unannounced, taken the boys, and was scheming further. Clarissa's frustration and Bud's cryptic promises only heightened my anxiety. I checked my GPS and noticed Bud's office light was still on. Clarissa's message indicated she was getting restless. I turned off the computer, knowing that after Christmas, Bud would be gone for nearly 2 weeks. At 9:30 p.m., Shannon texted, inviting me over for a late glass of wine. I quickly replied, "Be there in 20. When I arrived at her cozy house, Shannon greeted me warmly in soft pajamas. We shared a hug and a gentle kiss, and I felt a strong connection as we sat on the sofa together. Shannon and I enjoyed a quiet, intimate moment, embracing each other and sharing our warmth. We took comfort in our closeness, feeling a deep, genuine bond. Her smile and soft whispers showed her appreciation, and I felt a rush of emotions, realizing how much I cared for her. We continued to hold each other, the world outside fading away as we focused on our connection. Shannon's affection made me feel valued and loved. As we cuddled, I knew I was truly in love with her. "You certainly know how to make a girl feel special," she whispered. "I always try to make you happy," I replied, giving her a quick kiss. We stayed wrapped in each other's arms, savoring the moment. I focused on the warmth of our shared moment, pushing aside thoughts of the outside world. When Shannon suggested moving to the bedroom, I followed eagerly. We settled under the covers, savoring our connection and intimacy. An hour later, as we lay together, Shannon asked, "What will happen when everything with your wife and boss comes to a head?" I paused, considering my response. Honestly, right now, avoiding serious trouble is a victory. Keeping my job until I find something else is next. As for Clarissa, I don't see myself going back. Even if she wants to reconcile, I won't consider it. Shannon's eyes searched mine. So where does that leave us? Only you can answer that, I replied. But I promise to be in your life as long as you want me to be. We shared a tender moment before drifting to sleep, content in each other's arms. The next morning, I quietly left Shannon's house, feeling a pang of regret but knowing I had plans. I spent Christmas Eve with Nick and Jake, enjoyed a meal, attended a service at St. Matthew's, and opened presents at home. Clarissa was away with the kids and didn't invite me to join her family for Christmas, which hurt but felt right. Instead of spoiling her, I focused on treating my boys. Clarissa's complaint about not receiving a gift highlighted her self-centeredness. With Bud off until after New Year's, I began planning my counterattack, dubbed Operation Bitch Slap. I used the holiday lull to work from home and gather evidence. Chris and Tanya helped me sift through thousands of calls and messages between Bud and Clarissa, revealing Bud's intentions against me. Bud had plotted to frame me with false claims from Elmer Suggs and mishandled department funds. With Tanya's help, I corrected financial discrepancies, ensuring the records reflected proper management and clearing any suspicion about misuse of funds. The account Bud had set up in my name remained open only due to the paperwork showing I had opened it. Despite his efforts, the bank president, a friend of both Bud's and mine, needed to discuss the situation. Bud had found a way to open an account in my name without proper department authorization. Although no funds had been transferred yet, Bud planned to create workplace issues by pressuring female deputies to make false claims. To counter this, I organized a surprise training session on workplace behavior and respect for the entire department. I also held private meetings with each member, documenting our commitment to a respectful environment. The feedback from both female and male deputies was positive. In dealing with property and evidence issues, Jeff's confession and Tanya's swift action prevented serious trouble. We recovered all evidence and ensured proper procedures were followed, avoiding any potential legal trouble. Bud's attempts to undermine me included manipulating payroll and vehicle maintenance logs, but Chris, Tanya, and I corrected these issues before Bud returned to work on January 3rd. Bud's bold messages to Clarissa revealed his plans to undermine me and affect my personal life, which deeply angered me. The realization of Bud's unpredictability made me decide to run for sheriff of Mason County with Bud's unwitting support. As Bud began his re-election campaign, I prepared to act against him with the evidence we had collected. Thanks to Chris and Tanya, I had 3 binders filled with incriminating emails, texts, and phone records. Tanya had even traced IP addresses and managed Bud's email and phone records to make it appear that Clarissa had sent the messages. Although we didn't track phone calls due to their documentation on bills, I felt confident in our position. In late January, I had been spending time with Nick and Jake and often had dinner with Shannon and Bridget. To maintain good relations, I accepted an invitation from Suzanne Sullivan for a family dinner. Arriving at their beautiful home, I was greeted warmly by Shannon and her family. Jack Sullivan, however, greeted me with a serious demeanor. Jack invited me to help with chores at the barn before dinner. I agreed and joined him, unloading hay for the pregnant cows. As we worked, Jack opened up about his family. He shared the struggles Suzanne endured during Shannon's pregnancy and expressed his regret for not being there for Shannon and Bridget. He vowed to protect them now. Jack then asked about my plans with Shannon and Bridget. I explained my difficult situation with Clarissa and Bud Roberts, revealing their attempts to undermine me. Jack's expression softened as he listened. I told him of my intention to marry Shannon once my divorce was finalized. Jack, moved by my words, agreed that it would be an honor to have me as a son-in-law. We returned to the house for dinner, where Shannon and Suzanne greeted us with relief. The meal was warm and comforting, and we enjoyed family time with a cozy fire and favorite movies. After dessert, I held Shannon's hand, and we shared a tender moment. I told her I loved her deeply, and she responded with her love as well. As I left, I promised to explain my conversation with Jack later. I watched Shannon from my rearview mirror, feeling a mix of emotions. Driving back to the motel, I called my kids' temporary caretaker, knowing where Clarissa and Bud were. I told Clarissa I wouldn't be visiting the farm this weekend, and Bud had mentioned he was out of town for county matters that likely involved my wife. When Bud answered my call, I said, I know where you are and what you're doing. I want to settle things with you and Clarissa. Let's meet and discuss it. Bud agreed to meet at the farm the next day. I arrived promptly at 2 o'clock, letting myself into the house. Bud and Clarissa were already there, and Bud offered me a drink. I asked for a glass of whiskey hidden in the pantry, which Bud found with some confusion. As Bud retrieved the bottle, I joked about hiding it so Clarissa wouldn't find it, which caused a moment of awkward laughter. I poured myself a glass and settled into my chair, enjoying the whiskey while Bud looked on, clearly interested. I then opened a briefcase containing 2 thick binders. Bud asked what they were for, and I told him my guest would explain soon. I asked Bud if he cared for Clarissa and what he valued about her. Bud's initial answer about physical attraction was unsatisfactory. He seemed to think I was trying to win Clarissa back by showing I cared more. "No," I replied. "That's not my goal here. Clarissa and I are done," I told Bud. "We've been together for over 12 years. "Do you know her favorite color?" I asked. Bud just stared. "It's yellow," I said. "It reminds her of the sun from her childhood." I continued questioning Bud, her favorite song, Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve, the toy she wanted but didn't get until I gave it to her, an easy bake oven, her biggest childhood fear, getting eaten by a plant, her favorite band, the Dave Matthews Band. I wanted Bud to understand how well I knew Clarissa, a depth he clearly lacked. Clarissa sat quietly on the couch, tears in her eyes. "Are you happy now, Patrick?" Bud asked. "No," I replied. "This doesn't bring me joy. I just want to end this." Bud was confused about my intentions. "I wanted to show Clarissa that you don't truly know her, that you want her only because she's with someone else, and I wanted to end this." Bud dismissed my claims, but I told him I meant every word. Just then, a car pulled up. I opened the door to reveal Marion Lawson, the Mason County attorney. Bud was shocked. "Marion, please, sit down," I said. Marion and Bud took their seats. I handed them each a binder. "These contain evidence of the affair between Clarissa and Sheriff Roberts, as well as plots against me orchestrated by Bud to ruin my career and family." Bud's face reddened with anger, and Marion looked stunned. "These documents detail plans to frame me for various crimes," I continued. "If Bud had succeeded, I'd be imprisoned." Bud jumped up, shouting that the evidence was false and would be dismissed in court. Marion agreed that the evidence's validity depended on how it was obtained. I remained calm. "Look closer at the documents," I said. Bud hesitated, then began flipping through the binder, his expression shifting as he read. "Bud, do you know what an IP address is?" I asked. "Of course," he replied. "Good. Every device has one," I explained. "Now look at this email memo you sent from your county computer. Compare the IP address on it to those on the emails you sent to Clarissa." Bud's face went pale as he realized they matched. "What did you do?" he asked, shocked. Marion Lawson, looking anxious, asked the same. "He set me up," I said. "He made it look like I sent those emails." I handed Bud a binder with transcripts of text messages showing they were sent from his work phone. Bud was speechless, and Marion was astonished. "Look closely," I urged Bud. "Everything is there, including the emails and texts you sent to Clarissa." Marion, who was troubled, saw the extent of the situation. "You promised me this was handled, Bud. Quinn's got you trapped." "Check out the messages," I said. There were over 200 detailing conversations between Bud and Clarissa. Marion realized the scandal's impact. "I might not build a criminal case, but this will ruin your career and life," he warned Bud. Bud finally gave in. "Okay, Patrick, what do you want?" I looked at Bud and Clarissa. "First, your relationship is over. No contact or there will be serious consequences." Bud challenged me. "What if I don't agree?" "Whatever I decide to do is unavoidable," I said, enjoying the look of defeat on Bud's face. "And I'm not the only one with these documents. Others helped me." Bud guessed. "Chris Hayes?" "Correct," I confirmed. "She's highly skilled. Now for my second condition. At the JCS meeting on Monday, you will announce you won't seek re-election and support me for sheriff. Clarissa and Lawson must also support me." Clarissa, who had been crying, perked up at the mention of me becoming sheriff. Lawson, though frustrated, knew there was no escape. I still held more information on him that I wasn't ready to reveal yet. "And if I refuse?" Bud asked, already knowing the answer. If you refuse, I'll hand all this evidence to the state authorities. You'll face serious charges and ruin many lives with your actions. You'll likely end up in prison and your career will be over, I warned. Lawson, frustrated, urged Bud to concede. Just complete your term, step down, and retire quietly, he said. Bud agreed, but questioned why he couldn't be with Clarissa. You and Clarissa are done. No contact, I stated firmly. If I even suspect you're still involved, I'll act. Bud, defeated, apologized to Clarissa and left. She was stunned, clutching her stomach. Lawson, about to leave, warned, "The longer this drags on, the worse it looks for you. I could come after you later." I countered, "I'm running for sheriff this November. You can support me or oppose me, but I have strong allies now. And speaking of allies, how old are the girls in those pictures on your computer?" Marion's shock was palpable. "A supportive article in the Red River Falls Sunday paper would be nice," I suggested with a smile. Marion, visibly shaken, quickly left. The next morning, Bud announced he wouldn't seek re-election at the JC's meeting, and I decided to wait a week before announcing my candidacy. This time would help me assess my competition. Potential challengers included Tom Wellington, a local business owner, and Amy Van Deeken, a respected deputy. Pete Sturgeon from the Red River Falls Police Department also posed a serious threat. A week later, I declared my candidacy. At a press conference, both Sturgeon and Van Deeken withdrew from the race, leaving me with Wellington as the only competitor. With Bud and Lawson supporting me, and Amy joining my campaign, I felt confident. Tanya's discovery of incriminating evidence on Lawson's computer had been a crucial win, solidifying my position and ensuring my path to becoming sheriff was clear. Tanya went beyond discovering inappropriate content on Marion Lawson's computer. She cleverly embedded incriminating evidence into what looked like innocent family photos. To the untrained eye, these were just pictures of Marion's family, but the FBI would recognize them for what they were: videos and images of young girls in compromising situations. Tanya uploaded these images to Lawson's Facebook and a cloud account he couldn't access, making it seem like they were uploaded from his home computer. If found, Lawson could face severe prison time. I admired Tanya's work and considered giving her a role in my team, recognizing her impressive skills. At home, my life underwent significant changes. I never promised Clarissa a reconciliation, and her dreams of being with Bud Roberts were shattered. Despite my lack of assurances, she diligently maintained the household, cooking and keeping things in order. I moved back from the motel to the farm, choosing to sleep in the guest room with new bedding, creating a fresh start. With my campaign in full swing, Shannon, Bridget, Jack, and Suzanne all supported me. Bud Roberts and Marion Lawson's endorsements were a boost, and local figures backed my campaign over Tom Wellington's. Despite my busy schedule, I spent time with Shannon on weekends, which felt fulfilling and necessary for me. Clarissa attended some campaign events, trying to show her support and hint at her desire to be the sheriff's wife. One Saturday night in September, after an event and a shower, I went to bed, thinking Clarissa was asleep. To my surprise, she entered the guest room, her presence unexpected. "Patrick, are you still awake?" she whispered, sitting beside me. "I want to talk about our future." I was too tired and wanted to postpone. "Can it wait until morning? I just got home and I'm exhausted." She touched my arm and said, "I want you to come to bed with me. It's been a long time. I'm ready to think about our future together." I turned away, frustrated. "I can't be with you anymore. There has to be a real connection, and I don't feel that for you. Everything changed after what happened. I know you care, but I can't go back." Clarissa, still hopeful, argued, "I'm trying to save our family. I wish you would fight for us, too." I was firm. "I can't. You chose to be with Bud, and I won't pretend that didn't happen. I'm not interested in rekindling our relationship." Clarissa's voice was filled with desperation. "I worked hard to improve our relationship while you were with him. Where were you when my life was at risk? I know I wasn't there immediately, but I'm trying now. Look at what I've done these past months. Being a good wife and mother, taking my medication. Doesn't that count for anything?" I felt frustration rise. "You think just because you're here now, everything should be fixed? You hurt me deeply, sharing our life with someone else. Do you have any idea how that feels?" Clarissa pleaded. "Just give me a chance. I promise to make things right. I want to fix our marriage. I'll give you everything you need." I struggled with my emotions. Despite everything, her appearance and words stirred old feelings. "Clarissa, I need you to be honest. During your time with Bud, did you ever cross the line we agreed on?" She assured me, "Absolutely not. I would never do that." "Good," I said. "That means there's still something to work with. But if we're going to save our marriage, we need to be open and honest." Clarissa seemed unsure. "I want us to reconnect without focusing on the past. This moment is crucial," I responded. "Are you ready to move forward by letting go of pride, or will you cling to it and give up on us?" After a long silence, I said, "Good night, Clarissa. Please close the door behind you." Her voice trembled. "Okay, Patrick. I'll do what you want. Just promise you won't hurt me." "I promise," I replied. She agreed, and I followed her to the master bedroom, which I hadn't used in almost a year. Clarissa, looking uncertain, asked, "What do you want me to do?" "Just lie down and try to relax," I suggested gently. She settled on the bed, and I noticed how well she had taken care of herself. I found some lotion and tried to lighten the mood. Clarissa closed her eyes, trying to stay calm. I took her hand and guided her to sit on the edge of the bed. "We need to talk about what's happened between us," I said softly. Clarissa's voice wavered. "I'm scared of what might happen if we can't fix this." "We can only move forward if we're honest and work through the pain," I said, wiping a tear from her cheek. We spent the next hour talking deeply about our fears and frustrations. For the first time in a while, there was a spark of hope. We agreed to seek help together, aiming to rebuild our relationship with understanding and support. It was a small step, but it was a start. The thought of Shannon eased my anger, and I felt a sudden calm. I moved away from Clarissa, who seemed to fear I was about to react aggressively. Instead, I picked up my shorts and reflected on the situation. Lashing out would only lower me to her level, especially after everything she and Bud had done. I had kept my promise to never intentionally hurt her, despite the betrayal. Clarissa, wiping her tears, asked, "What's wrong? Why did you stop?" "I thought I wanted this," I said, "but what I really want is to be able to look my boys in the eye and say I never meant to hurt their mother. If I go down a bad path, I won't be able to do that." "I'm sorry, Clarissa. I know you're trying, but you don't truly regret what happened. You only regret getting caught. You seem to want to keep up appearances rather than genuinely fixing things. I need more than that." I walked back to the guest room, closing and locking the door behind me. Clarissa's cries echoed through the night, her apologies fading as she finally fell asleep. At my swearing-in ceremony as sheriff, Judge Chester's voice rang out, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the new sheriff of Mason County, Sheriff Sean Patrick Quinn, Jr." Applause filled the room. I took the podium and acknowledged my predecessor, Sheriff William Bud Roberts, for his 32 years of service. I presented Bud with a shadow box containing an American flag, the Mason County seal, his sheriff's badge, and a plaque celebrating his service. Bud, visibly moved, said, "Patrick, I'm really touched. Thank you." I responded, "Let's give one more round of applause for our outgoing sheriff. After this, please join us downstairs for cake and refreshments in Bud's honor." As Bud accepted his retirement, his presence dwindled, which allowed me to make changes within the department. With several retirements and Bud less involved, I managed appointments and promotions more freely, even though some processes could bypass the Citizen Advisory Board's recommendations. Addressed the room. We've had several recent retirements and changes in property oversight. Jeff McCauley is transitioning to become the food service supervisor for the Mason County Department of Corrections. With Bert Fielding's retirement, I've decided to merge the property and evidence supervisor role with the head jailer position, creating a lieutenant role. I've allocated funds for a larger office space, and I'm promoting Deputy Amy Van Deeken to this new position. The room applauded as Amy smiled and shook my hand. This change will save the county over $30,000 annually, earning another cheer. Next, I announced promotions for 2 sergeant positions, Deputy Danny Larson to the day shift and Deputy Angel Ryerson to the evening shift. Both were met with applause as they came forward. I also needed to fill the chief deputy and captain roles. After reviewing past applications, I chose Lieutenant Benito Ben Villanueva for the position. Ben, surprised and pleased, promised to live up to the role. I kept to myself that Ben hadn't applied initially, but had recently submitted an application. With Ben moving up, the day shift lieutenant position opened. I appointed Deputy Christopher Hayes, who has over 12 years in the department and relevant academic and training credentials. Chris was thrilled, and I surprised him with plane tickets and a voucher for a stay at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. I closed the ceremony with a thank you to everyone for their support. Afterward, I called Chris back to the podium to assign him an important task, delivering a divorce petition to Cheyenne Patrick Quinn, Jr. Chris accepted with a grin. As I left for Bud Roberts' retirement party, I hoped to enjoy a private celebration with Shannon later, planning to propose and make our relationship official. I glanced at the ring box in my pocket and caught Bud's eye, letting him see my irritation. He gave a shy wave, acknowledging the shift in power. "There's a new sheriff in town. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like."